What if everything you think you know about ancient Egypt is a meticulously crafted illusion, an artful mirage concealing a world of chaos, betrayal, and the grotesque? Beneath the gilded masks and soaring pyramids lurks a society riddled with scandal, where pharaohs weren't just deities, but also backstabbers, power-hungry maniacs plotting their next move in a deadly Game of Thrones. Forget the romanticized image of serene hieroglyphics and sun-kissed tombs. What if I told you that ancient Egyptians juggled royal intrigues like a circus act, with the same zeal and humor as a modern-day political scandal, complete with assassinations that would make your Netflix true crime docuseries look like child's play? Imagine a city where the Nile flows not just with life but with blood, where priests whispered prophecies of doom while fiddling with their fortunes. The pyramids? Mere mausoleums for egos too inflated to deflate. Flawed and utterly human. You think Cleopatra was the epitome of cunning? Think again. She was the tip of a monstrous iceberg, an ice-cold strategist in a sea of ambition where the back-alley deals were as common as the trade in papyrus. Did you know the Egyptian court was a hotbed of gossip rivaling your favorite celebrity tabloid? Everyone was one dagger's thrust away from death, one scandal from disgrace. Every artifact you admire hides a story darker than the night sky over the Sahara. Beneath the polished stone, an underbelly of scandal festers. You want tales of glory? How about the ones where family ties are more like nooses? The thrill of the chase isn't just for the archaeologists, it's the thrill of survival in a world where the only constant is betrayal. Pharaohs were not just rulers, they were gladiators in a colosseum of power, and the stakes were as high as the Great Pyramid itself. Love? It was simply another weapon, wielded with the precision of a scimitar to cut throats and hearts alike. Picture this, a land of opulence where even the gods played favorites, and the afterlife was just another level of competition, each soul vying for the best real estate in the field of reeds. The rich feasted while the poor scraped by, a social chasm so deep it could rival the Nile's own depth. The laughter echoed in lavish banquets, a dark humor woven into the fabric of daily life, where jesters danced on the graves of their betters. And yet, the real question gnaws at you: how much of this was written by the victors? What truths lie buried beneath the sands, obscured by time and myth? The pharaohs painted their portraits in gold, but what of the shadows that loomed behind? What secrets, what unspeakable histories bled into the golden hue of their civilization? Ancient Egypt, a tapestry of grandeur and grime, a riddle wrapped in a mystery, waiting for someone brave enough to pull at the threads. So prepare yourself, because the truth may shatter everything you thought you knew. The sun hung low, a molten eye bleeding into the horizon, as Nefret crouched over a pile of cracked clay pots. The air was thick, soaked in the scent of earth and sweat, a symphony of sounds crashing around her, a distant call from a merchant, the wail of a child, the cawing of crows circling above like harbingers of doom. Every beat of her heart echoed with uncertainty, a pulse of desperation threading through her veins. Today was not just another day. Today, the Nile threatened to swallow her village whole. I remember, she whispered to herself, when the waters danced, not devoured. The memories flickered like the dying light, laughter, children splashing, the sun glimmering off the surface like 1,000 diamonds. Now, all of it felt like a cruel joke. The Nile was a fickle friend, a serpent coiled tight, ready to strike. Across the village square, her brother, Ka, stood with arms crossed, his brow furrowed in thought that cut deeper than any knife. His hands, calloused and strong, betrayed the tenderness he felt but could never voice, a protector forged in the fires of survival. Nefret, he called, urgency threading through his tone. We must gather the others. If the flood comes, we need to evacuate. He was a rock, dependable, yet there was a flicker of fear in his eyes, like a candle in a gust, ready to be extinguished. I can't leave, she said, defiance slashing through her voice. I can't abandon our home, our family. Home. Ka's laughter was brittle, cracking under the weight of despair. What is a home if it drowns? If it is lost to the waters? You think the gods care for our prayers when they're busy juggling the stars and the chaos of the cosmos? He was right, of course. She knew this. But the thought of leaving sent shivers down her spine, a bone-deep ache that felt more real than the ground beneath her feet. She could not simply walk away from the ghosts that lingered in the shadows of their mud-brick house, the laughter of their mother echoing in her ears like a haunting melody. "Remember the stories our mother told us?" Nefret's voice was a threadbare whisper, laced with the nostalgia of cracked memories. "How the gods once walked among us. How they watched over the crops and filled the Nile with life." Ka shook his head, dismissing the tales that shaped her reality. "Those are just stories. They won't save us now." His words were knives, cutting through the fragile ties that bound them. But it was not just the looming flood that filled Nefret's heart with dread, it was the churning uncertainty of their lives, the impending visit from the tax collector, his eyes as cold as the moonlit waters, demanding more than they had. The little rice, the few dates, their offerings to the gods felt like bitter ash in her throat. "I remember," the words tumbled out of her, raw, jagged, a desperate plea against the inevitability of loss. "I remember when we had enough to eat. When worry didn't gnaw at my stomach like an insatiable beast." "Stop," Ka snapped, the tension flaring like a firebrand. "You're making it worse." The ground beneath her felt unstable, and she clutched the edges of her resolve, heart racing as the sky darkened, shadows creeping like fingers over the landscape. She wanted to scream, to tear at the air, to demand the gods answer why they were being punished. Yet, all she could do was stand there, a fragile vessel of fear, woven with strands of hope that felt like threads ready to snap. The village was alive with an urgency, echoes of prayers merging with the cries of children as families prepared for an escape that seemed ever more likely. A woman, stout and weary, clutched her baby close, a protective gesture that seemed futile against the encroaching tide. Nefret's heart twisted, a knot of empathy tightening within her. She turned back to Ka, his expression softening momentarily, the brother she knew, the protector of their childhood. "If we run," she breathed, "what will become of our home? Will it be left for the gods to take?" He stepped closer, the air thickening with unsaid words. "Home is not a place, it's a feeling. We can rebuild. But first, we must survive." And there it was, the fracture between them, a chasm of understanding and tension, where dreams of the past collided with the harsh reality of survival. The village was a tapestry woven with their memories, but the flood was coming, a beast on the horizon, and she was terrified of what it might take. "I won't go," she said, her voice a steel thread in the chaos. "I will not let fear bury my heart." Ka's eyes turned stormy, the shadows of their ancestors hovering close, a silent audience to their struggle. "Then you will drown with it." The words hung in the air, sharp and unforgiving, a reckoning she could feel deep in her bones. She wanted to scream, to rage against the tides of fate that threatened to swallow them whole. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, the shadows thickened, a curtain of night draping over their fragile lives. And amidst the rising tide of chaos, the whispered prayers of the villagers became a haunting melody, a lullaby for dreams lost to the rushing waters. "I remember," Nefret murmured, as if recalling a forgotten promise. But the air was heavy, cloying, and she could feel the weight of the cosmos pressing down, the stars above indifferent to their plight, twinkling in cruel mockery. In this moment, as the night wrapped its arms around the village, she understood that life beyond the monuments etched in stone was a tapestry of survival, love, an unyielding fear, a relentless cycle of birth and death, laughter and tears, echoes of the past entwining with the unknown future. The floodwaters rose, shadows danced, and uncertainty lingered, wrapping around them like an eternal embrace. The sky hung heavy, a slate-grey blanket smothering the earth, while the Nile curled beneath it like a serpent, both life-giving and lethal, whispering promises as it slithered past. Khufu stood at the riverbank, mud-caking his sandals, the weight of the world, or was it the weight of the gods, pressing down on his shoulders. Around him, the air buzzed with tension, the villagers frantic, their voices a cacophony of fear. "Flood! The flood is coming!" A child's cry pierced the air, piercing hearts like arrows. His breath quickened, almost shallow, racing against the encroaching tide of despair. He felt the earth tremble beneath him, and it wasn't just the fear of the water, it was the fear of the memory, of his father, gone, swept away by the very river that promised fertility and sustenance. The Nile had given him life, but it had also taken his father's. He could almost hear the echoes of laughter as they splashed together in the shallows, a collision of joy and innocence. But now, as the villagers ran, eyes wide like the oiled lanterns flickering in the darkness, Khufu felt the haunting grip of fate. The river, it seemed, was both a cradle and a grave. "Mama!" A voice called out, breaking through the din. It was Tia, his younger sister, her small frame shaking with panic. She had always looked to him for strength, her eyes bright with hope, but now they flickered, drowning in uncertainty. Khufu rushed to her, scooping her up, cradling her against his chest, feeling her heart race, a tiny drumbeat against the symphony of chaos. "It's going to be okay," he lied, feeling the cold sweat of doubt trickle down his spine. "We'll find shelter." Yet, as they ran, Khufu couldn't shake the creeping dread that gnawed at him. The Nile was shifting, bending to its own will, its beauty marred by the threat of destruction, a reminder that the gods played with their lives as puppeteers with fragile strings. He could see it now, the dark, swirling waters, swollen with anger, threatening to swallow everything in its path. Behind them, a woman screamed, the pitch sharp enough to slice through the air, and he turned just in time to see the river rise, a monstrous wave curling like a predator ready to strike. "Run!" he shouted, propelling them forward, the ground slippery beneath their feet, and with every step, his heart pounded a frantic rhythm. But how far could they go? The Nile snaked through their lives, and there was no escaping its pull. The villagers gathered, eyes wide with desperation, their shadows long and wild against the dying light. Among them stood Nefret, a healer with hands that had soothed many, but whose own heart was as tumultuous as the waters. She had treated Khufu's father in his final days, whispering gentle words that slid like silk through suffocating grief. But tonight, as her gaze met Khufu's, he saw a flicker of fear mirrored in her depths, a fear he shared, a fear of the unknown. "Khufu! We need to fortify the banks." Her voice rang out, a clarion call amidst the chaos, but he hesitated. "What if it's too late?" The words escaped him like breath from a deflating balloon, his doubt painting shadows across his resolve. Nefret stepped closer, her eyes fierce. "We fight, Khufu. We always fight." And there it was again, a ghost of memory, the echo of his father's laughter drowned out by the rush of water. That day, he had asked his father why the Nile was revered as a god. His father had smiled, a wicked twinkle in his eye. "The Nile gives and the Nile takes, son. It is the heart that beats within our land." As if on cue, the river surged forward, a reminder of the fickleness of life. Khufu felt his grip on Tia tighten, the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. "Keep her safe," he murmured to himself, a mantra in the storm, something to cling to amidst the rushing chaos. Nefret's determination ignited a spark within him, and he found himself nodding, joining the gathering of bodies preparing for the onslaught. They wove together, creating a line of unity, heart sinking, a pulse of defiance against the encroaching doom. The rain began to fall, heavy droplets splattering against the earth, mingling with the sweat and fear, a baptism of chaos. Khufu could feel the weight of time pressing against him, as if the very sands of the hourglass were slipping through his fingers. He couldn't afford to fail. Not now. Not ever. Each heartbeat echoed against the pulse of the Nile, a reminder that life and death danced hand in hand, that in one breath, joy could dissolve into despair. As the waters rose, engulfing the bank, he turned to Nefret, her face illuminated by the dim light of the torches, casting shadows that flickered like memories. In her eyes, he saw a fierce resolve, a determination that made him feel small yet emboldened. "Together," she said, voice firm yet soft, as though carving through the chaos with a delicate blade. Together, they were stronger, a fabric of resilience woven through the tapestry of despair. The villagers formed a barricade, hands digging into mud, fighting against nature's wrath with sheer will, with primal fear fueling their movements. Khufu joined the labor, his arms aching, his body screaming, but he pushed through the pain, daring to hope. They lifted earth, piled stones, creating a wall between their homes and the looming horror. Each breath was laced with the smell of damp earth and fear, each heartbeat a drum summoning courage. But as the Nile surged, it whispered dark truths, life was fleeting, and control was an illusion. The river, once a source of nourishment, now throbbed with the threat of annihilation, a merciless reminder that even the gods could turn their backs. And as Khufu's hands clawed at the earth, he he felt his resolve shatter, replaced by a haunting realization, even in strength, they were powerless against the unpredictable tide. Then came the moment of reckoning. The water crashed against their makeshift barrier, a violent roar that rattled his bones, and he felt time stand still. Something primal ignited within him, a fight-or-flight response. And in that instant, it became clear, this was not just about survival. It was about legacy, about the spirits of the lost and the dreams yet to be fulfilled. "Hold," he bellowed, finding his voice, the words rising from deep within like a phoenix from ash. The villagers rallied, eyes wide with fear but hearts blazing with determination. And as the first wave slammed into their wall, the earth shook beneath them, a reminder that they were tethered to something greater, caught in the grip of history, a blessing and a curse. In that moment, as the Nile roared, Khufu realized it was not merely water that surged through its veins, but the weight of generations, lives lived, loves lost, dreams shattered, and the unyielding march of time. They were all connected, droplets in the vast river of existence, and as the battle raged, he felt the pulse of life thrum around him like a heartbeat, wild and relentless. And he fought, not just for himself, not just for Tia or Nefret, but for the legacy of all those who had come before him, and all those who would follow. The Nile was both their lifeline and their executioner, a reminder that in every heartbeat, there was pain and beauty intertwined, a cycle of existence that would never truly end. The storm raged on, but in the eye of the chaos, he found his purpose. The night air crackled with tension, an electric promise of what lay ahead, hope and despair, intertwined like the currents of the Nile. And as the river surged forth, so too did the strength of a people, resolute against the pull of darkness, ready to face whatever the night would bring, anchored to the one truth, they were alive, and they would fight. The sun dips low, a molten orb spilling its last golden blood across the Nile, casting long shadows that creep like whispers through the dusty streets of Thebes. A soft wind stirs the air, carrying the scent of baked clay and the distant echoes of laughter, children playing, oblivious to the chasm that separates them from the lives of the gods. But as twilight descends, the laughter fades into an uneasy silence, and the weight of the world presses down harder, like an invisible chain binding the heart and soul of Egypt. I remember the sound of sandals slapping against sun-baked stone, the frantic rhythm of my heart echoing the chaos within me. Aisha, my sister, is crouched in the corner, her dark eyes wide with terror, and I can barely breathe, knowing the truth that lingers in the air like smoke from a dying fire. We are the lowest of the low, the children of farmers, tethered to the earth in a world where the pharaoh's silhouette reigns supreme against the dying light. I can't shake the feeling of being a mere shadow in his grand design, a ghost haunting the corridors of power I'll never enter. "Do you think they hear us?" she whispers, her voice trembling, a fragile thing caught in the jaws of danger. The nobles, draped in silk as rich as river silt, eat their feasts and toast to prosperity while we navigate the narrow alleys, scraping together a life from the crumbs of their opulence. I remember the stories, the tales told by the old men at dusk, their beards as white as the desert sand, spinning yarns of pharaohs and their eternal bellies, never sated, never fulfilled. I can feel the tension in the air thickening, a palpable dread crawling up my spine, tightening like the rope around a condemned man's neck. The nobles, the priests, they are the very heartbeat of Egypt, and we are mere spectators, forbidden from even touching the hem of their garments. I've watched them parade through the streets, eyes hidden behind ornate masks, laughter erupting like thunder while we cower in the shadows, silent witnesses to their excess. Then, there's Ramos, my friend, a boy with dreams as vast as the cosmos, yet bound by the chains of his birth. He sits on the edge of the market, a makeshift stall before him, selling baubles made from the discarded treasures of the elite. One day, he says, his voice barely above a whisper, I will stand among them. I will wear the robes of a scribe. His eyes gleam with an unsettling fire, a flickering flame that dares challenge the darkness. I want to believe him, but the weight of our reality drags me down into the pit of despair where ambition is a luxury we cannot afford. Ramos, the gods hear only the rich, I murmur, my heart heavy with the weight of truth. Your dreams are made of the same dust as our feet. But he grins, that defiant grin that could set the world ablaze. And my feet will take me higher, I swear it. I will carve my own name into the walls of history. But history doesn't remember the forgotten, does it? It's the pharaohs, the masters of fate, who etch their stories in stone, their names echoing while the cries of the lowly fade into nothingness. Night envelops us, cloaking the city in its velvet embrace, but dread seeps in through the cracks of our modest shelter. I can feel it gnawing at my insides, wrapping around my heart like a vice. The pharaohs' guards prowl the streets, their shadows long and menacing, searching for trouble like wolves scenting blood. I imagine them gripping their spears, eyes glinting like polished obsidian, eager to crush any hint of rebellion. Aisha shivers beside me, her small frame trembling under the weight of the looming threat, and in that moment, I wish I could shield her from the horrors of reality. But how can I be a protector when I am but a child myself, lost in the dark? What if they come for us, she whispers, her voice a fragile thread, barely carrying in the oppressive silence. My heart races as I picture them bursting through our door, spears glinting in the flickering lamplight, dragging us into the night to face a reckoning we cannot comprehend. They won't come for us, I lie, forcing the words through my clenched throat. But the truth is far more sinister, lurking like a spectre in the corner of my mind. Our lives are expendable, mere collateral in the grand scheme of power and privilege. I remember the stories of the last uprising, the embers of rebellion flickering in the hearts of those tired of being silenced, only to be stamped out beneath the iron heel of authority. They spoke of blood in the streets, of echoes that would never fade. My pulse quickens, a drumbeat of fear that threatens to drown out all thought. Ramos, I say desperately, what if the gods have turned their backs? What if we are nothing but grains of sand in their hourglass? His eyes darken, the fire within dimming as reality clutches tightly around us. Then we must carve our own fate. We are not grains, we are the storm that can uproot the trees. The conviction in his voice ignites a flicker of hope that battles against the encroaching darkness, yet I feel the weight of our circumstances heavy upon us, threatening to crush our dreams to dust. The city sleeps, but not us. Our hearts thrum with the pulse of 1,000 thoughts, straining against the bonds of a society built on the fragile hierarchy of birthright. Above us, the stars wink in their eternal dance, indifferent to our plight, and I can't help but wonder, do they see us down here, struggling like ants beneath the feet of giants? Do they whisper our names in their cosmic chatter, or are we as inconsequential as the dust settling on the streets? I glance at Aisha, her small face framed by the thin light of our flickering lamp, and my heart twists with longing and despair. She deserves a world where laughter isn't laced with fear, where shadows don't creep closer with every heartbeat. As I clutch her tiny hand, I vow silently to protect her from this world, even as the walls close in around us, even as the echoes of power reverberate through every corner of our existence. Ramos' laughter rings out through the quiet, a haunting melody in the stillness, a song for the dreamers caught in a web of longing. One day, he says, his voice echoing against the stone walls, we will rise. But will we? Or are we destined to be echoes of dreams unfulfilled, trapped in the layers of a society that values gold over blood, privilege over pain? The night stretches on, vast and unyielding, and as I close my eyes, the weight of the future bears down, relentless, unmerciful, a clock ticking ominously toward an uncertain dawn. The air was thick, stifling, like breathing through a wet cloth soaked in despair. I stood, shivering, in the shadows of a grand structure, its marble facade glistening with the sheen of broken dreams. The sound of hammers striking stone reverberated off the walls, a sick symphony of labor. Each echo clawed at my insides, a relentless reminder that beauty often blooms from the ashes of suffering. I remember the first time I saw her. Elena, a girl no older than 16, her hands calloused, her spirit dimmed but not extinguished. The fire in her eyes flickered, a candle battling against a storm. She toiled under the unforgiving sun, her face glistening with sweat, droplets mingling with tears, silent witnesses to her plight. I stood far enough to study her, yet close enough to feel the heat of her anguish seeping into my skin. She lifted her gaze, and for a moment, our eyes locked, not with pity but a shared understanding of the chains that bound us, invisible yet unbreakable. "More stone," shouted the overseer, his voice like thunder rolling through a parched valley. He was a shadow among shadows, a dark figure wielding a whip that snapped through the air with a cruel authority. I flinched, not for myself but for the multitude of souls enslaved to his merciless whims. The crack echoed in my heart, a reminder of the power one man held over so many lives. "Keep working," he barked again, and with each word, the air thickened, stifling hope. I watched as Elena flinched, her shoulders slumping under the weight of expectation. It wasn't just the weight of the stone she carried, it was the weight of 1,000 dreams crushed beneath the boot of oppression. I wanted to scream, to tell her it would end, but what could I say that could pierce through the fog of despair that enveloped her? Beside her, another figure emerged from the haze, Jasper. He was older, perhaps in his 20s, his face lined with the marks of hardship. I recognized the set of his jaw, the way he clenched his fists around the tools, fighting against the urge to strike back. He was a warrior, but his battlefield was one of stone and suffering. I could see the conflict within him, the fire of rebellion flickering dangerously close to the edge of extinction. "Don't let them break you, Elena," he murmured one day, as they took a brief moment to catch their breath. "We are more than this. We are the bones of the earth, and they are mere shadows." His words hung in the air, heavy with longing, and I felt my heart race at the thought of defiance. But the overseer's whip was always a heartbeat away, always ready to silence the murmurs of hope. Days bled into nights, and the city around us buzzed with the frenzied energy of ambition. Towers of marble stretched into the sky, a grotesque celebration of human ingenuity built on the backs of the broken. I often thought of the ghosts wandering through the streets, remnants of those who came before us, the ones who had dreamed of freedom but found only shackles instead. Their whispers were faint, yet they echoed through the dark alleys of my mind. "We are alive," I reminded myself, "and so long as we breathe, there is a chance." But the chance felt like a frail ember fighting against a windstorm. One night, the moon hung low, cloaked in clouds. The air crackled with an energy that made my skin prickle. I could sense it, tonight was different. Elena stood atop a pile of rubble, her silhouette stark against the night, her voice cutting through the silence like a knife. "We are not just workers. We are the heart of this place," she cried, her words igniting a spark among the weary souls surrounding her. "They cannot build without us." Fear clutched at my chest as I watched her, the overseer's shadow looming just beyond the flickering lantern light. Would her bravery be her demise? Jasper stepped forward, eyes ablaze with a fierce determination that was infectious. "If we stand together, we can break these chains." His voice was a rallying cry, a tempest that stirred the hearts of those who had long been resigned to their fate. Yet, beneath the fervor, I sensed the undercurrent of dread. They were rousing the storm, and storms often brought destruction. The overseer appeared, fury etched into his face, and in that moment, the air thickened with anticipation. A heartbeat, a single moment of reckoning hung in the balance. I could feel the weight of their hopes, the fragile flickers of courage battling against the looming threat of violence. I wanted to scream, to join them, but fear gripped me, cold, relentless. What if this was the end? "Enough," the overseer roared, and with a swift motion, the whip cracked through the air, splitting the night with its venomous bite. Elena stumbled back, her defiance faltering, but Jasper rushed forward, arms raised in a protective stance. "No," he shouted, his voice breaking through the chaos, his body a shield against the cruelty of the world. The moment stretched, time suspended in a fragile web of tension, each heartbeat echoing the collective dread of those huddled around. I held my breath, my soul caught in the throes of fear and admiration, a simultaneous longing to break free and a desperate need to retreat. And as the whip fell, cruel and unyielding, I felt the earth tremble beneath us, a resonance of unspoken histories, of lives intertwined and destinies bound by the chains of labor and slavery. In that single breath of a moment, I understood, this was not just about stone and sweat. This was a battle for existence, for identity, for the right to dream. And even as the darkness loomed, I felt the first flickers of rebellion sparking against the night, a reminder that the workforce behind the wonders would not be forgotten, that their stories would weave through the very fabric of time, haunting the grand structures built on their backs. And somewhere within me, a whisper grew louder, "We are alive." The whip had cracked, but I sensed a shift, a crack in the foundation of despair. What came next was uncertain, but I knew one thing, the revolution had begun with a single heartbeat resonating in the darkness, calling out for freedom amidst the labor and slavery that had stitched our lives into the tapestry of history. The air crackled with tension, a gathering storm of whispered prayers and half-forgotten incantations. I stood in the shadow of the chapel, the moonlight spilling through cracked stained glass, igniting the room in splashes of haunting color. Please, God. Just one more chance, Sarah murmured beneath her breath, fingers trembling as she clutched a silver locket, a family heirloom, perhaps, heavy with history and grief. Her voice quivered, an echo of desperation that wrapped around my heart like cold steel. Across the room, the flickering candle flames danced ominously, casting long shadows that twisted and turned, as if the spirits themselves were eager to join the fray. Isaac, her brother, paced like a caged lion, his frustration palpable. Sarah, you can't keep doing this, he snapped, voice rising, reverberating against the stone walls. You think these rituals will bring Mom back? We're just living in the past. I remembered the nights when they would gather around the family altar, poring over worn-out pages of scriptures, incantations whispered like secrets into the night sky. Those were the days when hope felt tangible, when burning sage could ward off the darkness, when it seemed like the universe was listening. But that was before the accident, before the silence in their home became a living thing, a choking fog that twisted their smiles into grimaces of loss. Mom believed, Sarah shot back, her eyes glistening with tears that she refused to let fall. If we don't honor her, what's left of her? What's left of us? Each word was laced with a mix of anger and sorrow, a raw wound that refused to heal. I watched, transfixed, as the shadows around her seemed to grow, echoing the weight of her grief. Isaac stopped, the air around him thickening. And what about your life, Sarah? You're wasting away in this graveyard of memories. The word hung in the air, heavy and unyielding. I could almost see the thought curling around Sarah's heart, squeezing tight like a vice. Could he really understand the weight of her loss? The desperate need for connection, for an anchor in a world that had become a tempest? I could sense the storm inside her, the desperate yearning for something, anything, to fill the void. You think it's just about her? Her voice trembled like the flame of a dying candle. This is about me, about how I feel so lost without her. Every day feels like a ritual of suffering. I could almost hear the cracks forming in her heart, the slow crawl of despair that threatened to consume her. The clock on the wall ticked, 1 second, 2 seconds, 3. Each tick felt like a heartbeat, counting down to an inevitable confrontation. The space between them thickened, tension rising like steam from a boiling pot, ready to spill over. I stood there, a witness to their unraveling, wondering if I was more like Isaac, painfully practical, eyes averted from the ghosts, or like Sarah, clinging to the past, desperate for signs of life. And then it happened, a breathless moment when the chapel door creaked open, and Father Paul stepped in, his presence a blend of comfort and chaos. Children, he murmured, his voice soothing yet firm, like a balm applied to a festering wound. This isn't the way to honor your mother's memory. She wouldn't want this. But what did he know of the weight of loss? What did anyone know? The air chilled as he moved closer, as if even the shadows recoiled from his light. He looked at each of them, his gaze piercing yet compassionate, and it felt like a lighthouse in an unending storm. Rituals, he continued, are more than just actions. They're emotions, echoes of the living. Then why does it feel like a curse? Isaac spat, the words raw on his tongue, like bile. She's gone, Paul. How do we honor someone who isn't here anymore? The silence was deafening, it wrapped around us with the coldness of a forgotten winter, a weight pressing down. Sarah's hands shook, and I could feel the tension in her shoulders, a taut string ready to snap. You can't just tell me to let go, she said, each word falling like a stone. It's all I have left. Father Paul took a step closer, the flickering candlelight illuminating his face, revealing the lines of his own battles etched deep. Letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It's the act of remembering in a way that allows you to move forward, to live. I felt the truth of his words strike like lightning, illuminating their faces with a shocking clarity. Sarah's eyes darted between the two men, her heart caught in an emotional crossfire. But what if I forget her voice? What if I forget her laugh? Her voice broke, the dam finally bursting, revealing all the aching longing she had bottled up inside. Then you keep her alive in your heart, Father Paul said, his voice like a smooth river cutting through jagged rocks. You carry her with you, Sarah. It's not about the rituals. It's about the love. The laughter. The memories. The shadows danced again, whispering secrets of the past, of dreams lost in the abyss. The tension thickened, the air electric with unresolved emotion. I felt it creeping up my spine, the agony, the euphoria, the heartache of it all. Life was a series of rituals, wasn't it? Waking up, breathing in, remembering, forgetting, loving, losing. Each moment a prayer, a battle, a quiet rebellion against the creeping darkness. "Then what do I do?" she whispered, vulnerability raw in her tone. With a slow breath, Father Paul extended his hand, palm open, an invitation to step into the unknown. Feel, Sarah. Allow yourself to feel. The fear, the pain, the joy. Embrace it all. And in that moment, amidst the flickering shadows and the weight of the past pressing down, something shifted. The ritual of grief became a ritual of living, a flicker of hope igniting in the darkness. Time seemed to warp, stretching and collapsing, and with it, the echoes of laughter, the whispers of love, the tangible presence of the lost began to weave themselves back into the fabric of their lives. I stood there, heartbeat syncing with theirs, feeling the electric pull of their sorrow and their tentative steps toward healing. What happens next? I couldn't tell. The world outside continued its relentless march, but inside, the ritual of the living was just beginning. The storm would pass, but the scars, the scars would remain, reminders etched in their hearts. And as they prepared to confront the dawn, I felt the weight of it all, an unending cycle of love and loss, pulling me further into the depths of their journey. The wind howled through the narrow streets, a ghostly choir echoing the cries of those long forgotten. Shadows flickered against the crumbling walls, where murals fought to keep their vibrancy alive, their colors bleeding into the stone like a memory refusing to fade. I stood there, heart pounding, breath catching in my throat as I watched the last remnants of a sunset bleed into the horizon. The world felt alive with whispers, as if the very air was pregnant with secrets longing to be shared. I remember a time when the grand temples loomed above us, their granite faces chiseled with the stories of gods and kings, and I thought that was all there was to art. But art has teeth, and it bites. Beneath the facade of beauty, raw pain throbbed like a heartbeat. People don't visit those temples to nod at the glories of a bygone age, they come to find themselves reflected in the cracks and crevices, the wounds carved into the stone by time and tumult. Then there was Lila, a street artist with paint-stained fingers that danced like her spirit, wild and untamed. The city was her canvas, a playground where dreams and desperation collided. She painted at night, each stroke fueled by the frantic rhythm of her heart. I watched her once, perched on a ledge in the dark, her silhouette against the wall where she splashed colors that screamed of joy and sorrow. "This," she said, her breath forming clouds in the cold, "is the only way I can scream without waking the dead." But Lila was haunted, the ghosts of her past nipping at her heels. I could see it in her eyes, the way she flinched at laughter, the way her smile faltered. She wore her scars like badges, each one a testament to battles fought and lost. Her art was her salvation, but it was also her prison. I remember the night she painted a mural of a broken clock, its hands frozen in time, and I knew then that she was not just capturing the city's pulse, she was laying bare her own. And there was Amir, who built sculptures from scrap metal, a scavenger of dreams and despair. His workshop was a chaotic symphony of clinking, clattering, and the occasional curse. He believed that beauty could be forged from the ruins of broken lives. "You see," he would say, gesturing to a twisted piece of metal, "there's elegance in the jagged edges." But I could see the weariness etched into his brow, the burden of a man who sought to create hope in a world that had forgotten how to dream. Amir carried the weight of his family's expectations like a millstone around his neck. His father had dreamed of grander things, a life away from rust and ruin, and Amir felt the suffocation of their unfulfilled hopes pressing down on his chest. Sometimes, when the shadows crept in, I could see him standing in front of his unfinished sculptures, his hands trembling as he fought back tears. "I am not the man they wanted me to be," he whispered, and it felt like the world held its breath. Those nights, when Lila painted and Amir sculpted, the city transformed into an echo chamber of heartbeats, each artist wrestling with the demons of their own creation. I remember standing in the space between them, heart caught in a vice, the air thick with unspoken words and fragile dreams. Could art really save them? Or was it merely a reflection of their broken souls? One evening, as the moon cast a silver hue over the dilapidated buildings, Lila and Amir found themselves on the cusp of a confrontation. The tension hung heavy, thick enough to slice through with a knife. "You're drowning in your own despair, Lila," Amir shouted, his voice reverberating off the walls like thunder. "You can't keep painting your pain, it's suffocating you." Lila's eyes darkened, her voice quivering with intensity. "And what do you know about drowning? You hide behind your metal and rust, afraid to face the truth. You think you can mold beauty from despair without breaking yourself in the process." Their words crackled in the air, a fierce electricity that held the shadows captive. I felt my heart race, caught between their anguish. The city around us faded into a blur, the only reality was this crucible of emotion. The clock tower in the distance struck midnight, each chime a reminder of time lost and dreams deferred, echoing through the streets like a heartbeat gone awry. As the confrontation reached its peak, the rawness of their emotion spilled over, enveloping us in a wave of desperation. Their pain, their dreams, and their failures danced like phantoms in the air, swirling around us, binding us together in a tapestry woven from threads of anguish and hope. In that moment, I realized art is not merely about beauty but the gut-wrenching honesty of existence. It is the expression of our deepest fears, our most cherished dreams, and the ugly truths we hide from the world. Lila and Amir, with their flawed souls and passionate hearts, were fighting not just for their art, but for their very lives. I remember the intensity of that night, the way the air crackled with possibilities, how the shadows lengthened and danced, each flicker a reminder of the ghosts that lingered in the recesses of our hearts. It was then that I understood that art, in all its forms, is both a battle and a refuge. We create because we must, painting our scars on the canvas of existence, shaping our fears into something tangible. The fight was far from over, it was merely a prelude to the deeper conflicts lurking in the dark corners of our souls. We stood at the edge of something profound, a precipice of emotions and unspoken truths. The city whispered around us, its heart beating in rhythm with ours as we faced the ghosts of our pasts. The world felt heavy, ancient, and alive, holding its breath, waiting for the dawn to break, for the chains of silence to shatter. And as the first light of morning crept over the horizon, I knew that our stories were not finished. In the depths of despair, there lay the seeds of hope, waiting for the light to coax them into bloom. Art and culture were not just relics of the past, they were the lifeblood of our existence, the pulse of a world forever caught between dreams and reality. It was this tension, this beautiful, chaotic existence that propelled us forward, and with every heartbeat, every breath, we continued our dance with the shadows. The air was thick with an unbearable tension, each breath a shackle, each heartbeat a drum echoing the unspeakable truth. I stood in the middle of the dimly lit room, the flickering candlelight casting shadows that danced like ghosts on the walls, whispering secrets of lives half-lived. There she was, Ilara, her hands trembling as they gripped the hem of her dress, a crimson stain blooming like a tragic flower at her feet. The once vibrant fabric, now marred, was a testament to the reality of a world where women carried the weight of power even as they were shackled by invisible chains. I remember the day I first felt it, the weight of expectation settling onto my shoulders like a heavy cloak, she murmured, her voice quavering under the weight of her confession. I was just a girl, standing in the shadow of my father's ambitions, while my mother's dreams lay buried beneath the floorboards, suffocating in silence. The tears that streamed down her cheeks glistened like the shards of broken glass, sharp and glinting with pain, each drop a memory, a lost piece of herself. Across the room, Mara watched, her heart pounding like a war drum, echoing the battle that raged in her mind. She had long since learned the art of survival in this patriarchal arena, her spirit forged in the fires of loss and defiance. "You think you understand, Ilara? You think your pain is unique? I've seen mothers broken, daughters silenced, and yet here we are, still fighting for scraps of a life we deserve." Mara's voice was a whip crack, sharp and unforgiving. Each word carved into the air, demanding attention, demanding recognition. "They think they can cage us, mold us into their visions of perfection," she continued, pacing the room like a caged lioness. But what they don't realize is that every spectre they've created only serves to fuel the fire within us. Outside, the night was a cloak of darkness, the moon a distant witness to their struggle. Time seemed to warp, each second stretching into eternity, as the clock ticked away, a metronome of despair. Ilara's hands now clutched a dagger, the blade reflecting the chaos swirling in her mind. I remember the moment I realized that power wasn't just something to be claimed, but something to be wrested from the jaws of those who would keep us small, she whispered, her gaze unwavering. The air crackled with unspoken words, heavy and electric. The dagger felt foreign in her hand, cold and hard, a symbol of the violence that lurked beneath the surface of their existence. Is it wrong to wish for something more? Ilara asked, glancing at Mara, her voice barely above a whisper, heavy with uncertainty. Is it selfish to want to be both the nurturer and the warrior? Mara's eyes softened, the fierce fire dimming for a moment as she stepped closer, bridging the chasm of fear that threatened to swallow them whole. No, my dear Ilara, she said, her voice low and soothing like the lullaby of a mother long gone. It's not selfish. It's survival. It's the essence of who we are, the very fabric that makes us women. But the shadows in the corners of the room were thickening, coiling like serpents, each twist a reminder of the dangers they faced. Mara turned, her breath hitching in her throat as she sensed the shift. They're coming, aren't they? She didn't need to ask, the fear gnawed at the edges of her resolve, an unwelcome companion. I can't go back to that life, Ilara said, voice trembling, the dagger shaking in her grip. It was a stark contrast to the defiance that had been her armor just moments before. What if I can't do this? What if I falter? You are not defined by their cages, Mara urged, her own heart racing with the knowledge of the storm that lay ahead. The power lies not in what they can take from you, but in what you refuse to give. Remember the stories of our mothers, their hidden strength, the way they whispered their truths into the night, knowing it could cost them everything. You are that legacy, Ilara. You carry their fire. And in that moment, the world outside faded, it was just the two of them, two fierce souls entwined in a battle larger than themselves. Ilara's breath shuddered, a storm of emotion swirling within her. She could feel the weight of history, the ghosts of countless women urging her to rise, to reclaim what was rightfully hers. I remember, she said, her voice rising like a phoenix from the ashes. I remember the stories, the whispers of rebellion. I remember the laughter that broke through the despair, the way hope shimmered like a mirage in the desert of oppression. I will not be silenced. Mara nodded, pride swelling in her chest, a rush of fierce love radiating between them. Together, we can shift the paradigm. We can turn the tide. They've underestimated us for too long. With the dagger now a symbol of her defiance, Ilara took a step forward, her resolve hardening. Let them come. We will rise from the ashes like the dawn. The night outside pulsed with impending danger, the air electric with anticipation. Shadows loomed, but in that flickering candlelight, two women stood unyielding, ready to reclaim their narrative, to carve their own path through the darkness. In the heart of a patriarchal storm, they discovered the strength that had been hidden, a power forged in the fires of their shared pain, a testament to all that was yet to come. And as the clock ticked on, the world held its breath, waiting for that moment when the whispers of history would transform into a roaring anthem of defiance, the cries of women rising to fill the void, unyielding and fierce. Time would mark their transformation, and in that charged silence, the promise of revolution lingered heavy in the air, waiting to be unleashed. The clash of steel echoed through the air like a cacophony of thunder, reverberating in the bones of every soldier poised at the edge of despair. I stood there, heart pounding, breath hitching in my throat, watching as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over a battlefield painted in blood and ruin. The scent of iron mingled with the acrid smoke of flames, and in that moment, I knew this was not just conflict, it was the very essence of our existence being forged in chaos. I remember the sound of horses galloping, hooves striking the earth like war drums, a warning of the storm that was about to break. Hold the line, someone screamed, but their voice was a whisper against the roar of war. A chill ran down my spine, an icy finger of dread curling around my heart as I searched for Eli, my brother, lost in the fray, his shadow swallowed by the maelstrom. He wore that armor like a second skin, but in my mind, I could still see the boy who once chased fireflies as dusk settled gently over our village. The battlefield was a grotesque tapestry of humanity. There were no heroes here, just men and women caught in the gears of a cruel machine, grinding them down to pulpy memories. As I scanned the chaos, I caught sight of Mara. Fierce and unyielding, she wielded her sword with a grace that belied the fear gripping her. Her eyes, sharp as daggers, mirrored the turmoil within. She had always been the brave one, never flinching from a fight, but now, as she faced the enemy, I could see the flicker of doubt eclipsing the fire in her gaze. Had she too felt the weight of a world burdened by endless conflict? "Stay close," I called, my voice nearly lost in the symphony of despair. But I wasn't just speaking to her, I was pleading with myself. This war had stretched our bonds to their breaking point. We had fought side by side, but the scars of our battles ran deeper than skin. Each cut, each bruise was a reminder of what we were losing, not just territory, but our very souls. The ground trembled beneath me as a cacophony of battle cries rose like a dark hymn. I could almost hear the echoes of history, of those who had fought before us, whose dreams were crushed under the heel of conquest. "I remember," I whispered, the words slipping through my clenched teeth like a prayer. I remembered the stories of the ancients, of glory and honor. But here? Here there was only horror. I felt the pulse of time, the weight of every decision that had led us to this moment. Then there he was, Eli. Emerging from the smoke, blooded but alive, his eyes wild with a tempest of fear and resolve. I wanted to run to him, to shield him from the chaos, but I was rooted in place, paralyzed by the sight of his madness. "You have to get out!" I screamed, but the words tangled in the air, lost in the din of clashing iron and screams of the dying. Mara stood beside me, her breath coming in sharp gasps, eyes darting between Eli and the oncoming tide of enemies. "We can't leave him," she cried, her voice rising above the chaos, fierce as a lioness protecting her cubs. But Eli was not a cub, he was a warrior, and warriors knew no fear. Somewhere deep inside, he thrived in the chaos, but I felt the pull of his humanity, the fragile thread connecting us. The ground beneath us felt alive, a throbbing mass of despair and hope intertwined. I saw a flash of silver, a spear thrusting towards Eli. Time seemed to slow, each heartbeat an eternity as I lunged, an instinctive reaction driven by love and fear. I pushed him aside, the spear slicing through the air where he had stood just moments before. In that heartbeat, I felt the weight of destiny, the crushing inevitability of loss. Eli turned, eyes wide with shock. "What have you done?" he yelled, but I was already moving, adrenaline coursing through my veins like wildfire. I had saved him, but at what cost? The swirling mist of chaos closed in on us, shadows of death looming closer. The air crackled with tension, an electric promise of violence and chaos. "Fight!" Mara shouted, her voice rising above the chaos as she collided with an enemy soldier, the clash of steel ringing like a funeral bell. I could see her spirit, fierce and unwavering, yet something in her eyes flickered, a realization that perhaps, even in our strength, we were vulnerable. And with every blow she struck, I felt the weight of the world pressing down on her shoulders, the knowledge that victory was a hollow prize when weighed against the cost of human lives. The enemy pressed forward, a relentless tide, and I felt despair creeping in, cold and suffocating. There was no glory in this battlefield, only the grim reality of survival at any cost. This was not how it was meant to be, I thought, the words echoing through my mind like a ghostly refrain. I remembered the dreams of a brighter future, of homes rebuilt and families reunited. But dreams feel distant when faced with the stark reality of conflict, when each breath is a gamble, each heartbeat a reminder of how fragile life truly is. Eli stood beside Mara, sword drawn, eyes filled with a wild determination that made my chest ache. But I could see the fear lurking just beneath the surface, the question of whether he would return from this chaos, whether any of us would survive. Together, I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper, but the weight of the word hung between us like a promise. Then, as the darkness closed in, I felt a flicker of resolve igniting within me. This battle was ours to fight, and fight we would. For every moment of terror, there was a spark of hope, a tenacity that refused to be snuffed out. And as the shadows loomed, I clutched my sword tightly, heart racing, ready to plunge into the heart of the storm. In that moment, we were not just soldiers, we were the very embodiment of hope, love, and defiance against the tide of despair. And in the midst of the chaos, as the world around us spun into a frenzy, I understood, this conflict was not solely about land or power, it was about the human spirit's unyielding desire to endure, to conquer not just the enemy, but the darkness within ourselves. The battle raged on, but in the depths of my heart, I felt the pulse of a greater truth, a truth that transcended the battlefield, binding us in an eternal struggle for what we held dear. The air crackles with tension, a static charge that coils around your chest like a vice. In the bustling heart of the market, the scent of spices wafts through the air, thick and intoxicating, mingling with the sweat of bodies pressed too close together. Shouts rise and fall like a symphony of chaos, merchants bartering, children laughing, and the distant clang of metal striking metal. But beneath this cacophony, an undercurrent of dread pulses, whispering secrets of desperation. I remember the moment I first saw Amina, her eyes fierce like the desert sun, brow furrowed in determination. She stood amidst the throng, negotiating prices with a merchant whose fingers were stained with the ink of deceit. Her hands, calloused and strong, gripped the edge of a woven basket filled with fig leaves, not just produce, her lifeline. Amina, the daughter of a trader, knew that each transaction was a gamble with fate, the stakes climbing higher with every coin exchanged. As she haggled, a flicker of memory flashed behind her gaze, a time when her father's laughter echoed through their home, now silenced by debts that loomed larger than the pyramids themselves. Then there was Cairo, a dockworker with a heart burdened by dreams that felt too large for his fragile frame. He felt the weight of every ship that docked at the Nile, each cargo hold a promise or a curse. The rhythm of his life was tied to the tides, the ebb and flow of trade. Cairo was painfully aware of the grip of the empire, where the rich grew fatter while the poor starved in shadow. He had seen men drown in their ambitions, their bodies swallowed by the river, and he feared becoming one of them. "Every man has a price," he murmured, eyes glistening with the weight of unfulfilled desires, but no one talks about the price of a soul. Amina and Cairo, two lives intertwined by the merciless dance of trade, stood on the brink of a storm. The marketplace was alive with color, but a darkness stirred beyond the horizon, creeping in from the edges, a new ruler with aspirations that towered like the great Sphinx, casting long shadows over their livelihoods. Rumors swirled like vultures overhead, whispering of taxes, of restrictions, of new powers claiming dominion over the very lifeblood of Egypt, the trade routes that tied the nation together like delicate threads. I remember the clatter of coins, the flicker of hope in Amina's chest when she heard of the caravan arriving with goods from far-off lands. "Silks from China," she exclaimed, her voice rising above the din. "We can trade for them, Cairo. They will sell like wildfire." But Cairo's heart sank. He saw the lines of desperation etched deeper into the faces of those around them. "And what will the price be, Amina? What will we lose in the name of beauty?" In these moments, time felt like a living thing, wrapping around them, constricting, and stretching in turn. The sun hung low, casting elongated silhouettes against the cracked cobblestones, and each shadow seemed to carry the weight of their fears. "Sometimes I think," Amina confessed, her voice barely above a whisper, "that we are just ghosts on this earth, destined to wander, searching for something that always slips through our fingers." But hope, as fickle as a desert breeze, ignited within her once more. "Trade is life," she shouted, her defiance ringing through the air like a battle cry. "It connects us. It feeds us." Cairo, though weighed down by cynicism, felt the pull of her conviction. He longed to believe in her fire, to kindle a spark within himself that might illuminate the path ahead. Yet, the weight of reality hung heavily upon him. As the sun set, bleeding crimson into the twilight sky, the marketplace transformed. An eerie hush fell across the stalls. Something was coming. Whispers of violence, of raids by bandits hungry for riches, sent shivers down spines. The merchants' faces twisted in fear, the glint of gold now a target, a curse. Amina and Cairo stood at the edge of this impending chaos, their hearts racing in synchrony, each beat a challenge to the darkness closing in. "Meet me by the river at dawn," Amina urged, her voice laced with urgency. If we are to survive, we must unite our strengths. Cairo nodded, but doubt gnawed at him. And what if it's too late? What if the river swallows us whole before we even get the chance to fight? The moon rose, and shadows lengthened, mirroring the uncertainty that coiled around them. I remember the chill of that night, the way the stars flickered with the weight of their dreams and worries. Each breath felt like an echo in a vast emptiness, a reminder of everything at stake. Amina's resolve was unwavering, but Cairo wrestled with despair, haunted by the ghosts of those who had fallen before him, men who had believed too fiercely in the promise of trade, only to find themselves crushed under its weight. The next day dawned grey, heavy with anticipation. The river, once a source of life, now felt like a harbinger of doom. Amina and Cairo met, determination etched across their features. They would navigate the treacherous waters of commerce, their hearts intertwined like the trade routes that wove through their land. "We are more than just traders," Amina declared, her voice a lighthouse in the fog of uncertainty. "We are the lifeblood of Egypt. Without us, the empire crumbles." But as they embarked on this path, the winds of change howled through the market, chilling them to the bone. They were not just fighting for survival, they were battling against time itself, which ticked away with maddening indifference. Each moment slipped through their fingers like sand from the desert, a reminder that nothing was certain, that everything they fought for hung by a thread. In the distance, the silhouette of a cart emerged, loaded with treasures from lands both near and far. The promise of prosperity glimmered just beyond their grasp, but so too did the danger of the unknown. The north winds whispered of betrayal, the kind that could slice through ambition like a knife through silk. And in that moment, as the sun broke through the horizon, illuminating the path ahead, Amina and Cairo stood poised on the edge of their destiny, hearts racing, breaths heavy with the weight of a world on their shoulders, two souls forever entwined in the relentless tide of trade and economy that would either sustain them or tear them apart. Time danced on, relentless and unyielding, carrying them into the unknown, where every heartbeat echoed with possibility, every breath thick with fear and hope. The smell hit first, a rancid, cloying sweetness that clung to the back of the throat like a bad memory. I stepped into the dim light of the tent, its flaps fluttering as if they were caught in a restless dream. The moans of the sick were a haunting melody, a sorrowful orchestra tuning before the symphony of despair. I could feel my heart racing, staccato beats echoing the urgency around me. This was the front line, a battleground draped in the suffocating haze of fear and contagion. "I can't do this," Clara whispered, her hands trembling as she clutched the fabric of her apron, stained and torn. I glanced at her, at the wide, terrified eyes that reflected a world spiraling into chaos. She was new, fresh from the training that felt like a cruel joke now. She had wanted to save lives, not watch them flicker out like candles in the wind. I felt the weight of her despair pressing down on my chest, a suffocating reminder of every life I had failed to save. "Clara," I murmured, my voice barely a breath. "We have to keep moving." The urgency clawed at me. The world outside was a mirror of the chaos within, streets filled with the shouts of the afflicted, families torn apart, dreams dashed against the hard stones of reality. But Clara's gaze drifted, lost somewhere beyond me. "It's not just a fever. It's a death sentence." The words fell like leaden weights, each syllable heavy with the truth we both wished to deny. I remember the first time I faced the spectre of disease. It was not in the sterile hallways of a hospital but in my own backyard, where laughter echoed off the walls like the whispers of ghosts. A neighbor's child, small and fragile, had fallen ill. I watched, helpless, as life drained from her tiny body like water slipping through cupped hands. "She just had a cold," they said, their voices tinged with disbelief. But the infection spread, a dark tide that knew no mercy. I didn't understand then, but I do now. We rushed to the next cot, the cries of the boy there piercing the air like shards of glass. He was no older than 10, his fevered skin glistening under the dull light. I shot a glance at Clara, her hands hovering above the boy, unsure, hesitant. "We need to cool him down," I urged, my own hand shaking as I began to dampen cloths. He was just a child, just a boy with dreams of adventure, now fighting against an unseen enemy. I felt a knot tightening in my stomach as I pressed the cool fabric against his forehead, a gesture that felt like a pitiful prayer. Around us, the tent was filled with shadows, phantoms of the lost lingering in the corners. Doctors and nurses hustled like restless spirits, their faces masks of determination and dread. Each person carried their own history, a tapestry woven with threads of grief and guilt. I remembered the countless nights spent in a similar tent, the echoes of laughter turned into cries for help. The moonlight had once been a comfort, now it felt like a taunt, illuminating the heart of our struggle against the rising tide of suffering. "Why do we keep doing this?" Clara asked, her voice trembling as she choked back tears. "It feels like we're fighting a losing battle." "We do it because we have to," I replied, though the conviction felt shaky. "For every life lost, there might be one we can save. Every heartbeat matters." But even as I spoke, doubt knotted itself tightly around my heart, a serpent squeezing out my conviction. I could see it in the way her hand shook, in the flicker of fear that danced in her eyes. The world outside was collapsing, and yet here we were, trapped in this tent, fighting an invisible foe with nothing but sheer willpower and a prayer. I remembered the stories of old, warriors without armor, battling plagues and curses, and the absurdity of it all settled heavy on my shoulders. Clara's breath was ragged, and I wanted to reach out, to pull her back from this abyss that threatened to consume her. "Let's take a break," I said, the words spilling out like a lifeline. "We can't save them if we don't save ourselves first." But the moment was swallowed by the sounds around us, the wails of the sick, the frantic shouts of those trying to find solace amid the chaos. In this world, there was no reprieve. I remembered my own mentor, an old doctor with a heart full of scars, telling me, in the face of disease, you have to be relentless, unyielding. You must carry the weight of their suffering, even when it feels unbearable. I remember the first patient I lost, I whispered, the admission slipping from my lips like a confession. A young woman, vibrant and full of life. She was a mother, a sister, a friend. I promised her I would save her, and yet I couldn't. The shame washed over me, a cold wave crashing against the walls I'd built around my heart. I saw her eyes dim. It haunts me still. Clara's gaze sharpened, a flicker of understanding igniting in her depths. "You carry their ghosts, don't you?" "Yes," I breathed, the weight of every lost soul settling heavily on my chest. "But we don't let them go. We honor them with our struggle." Outside, the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the ground, a stark contrast to the life that once thrived in this place. We could feel the encroaching darkness, and with it, the palpable sense of urgency that pressed against our chests. In the space between breaths, I felt the chill of despair creeping in, like night closing in all around us. But Clara stood by my side, and in her eyes, I saw a flicker of courage, a soft defiance against the suffocating dread. Together, we would face the next wave, the next cry for help. With a shared resolve, we turned back to the cots, the sounds of suffering a symphony that demanded our attention. The fight wasn't over, and though the shadows grew longer, their grip tightening, we would remain, two souls bound by the weight of humanity's struggles, determined to make every heartbeat count. The sun bled red across the horizon, casting long shadows that danced across the sand, whispering secrets from a world long gone. In the heart of Alexandria, a library stood, not just a building of stone and papyrus, but a temple of dreams, knowledge, and fear. I remember the air thick with dust and the scent of ancient ink. Books were not just words on pages, they were the lifeblood of a civilization, a silent scream echoing through the corridors of history, longing to be heard. In this moment, two souls collided, each bearing the weight of their desires and fears. Amora, a girl with eyes like molten gold, stood trembling beside the towering shelves. She clutched a scroll to her chest, its edges frayed like her resolve. She yearned to learn, to break the chains of ignorance that bound her. But with each heartbeat, the fear of what knowledge could unleash wrapped around her throat like a serpent, squeezing tighter with every breath she took. Could she bear the truth? Was she ready to confront the shadows of her forebears? Beside her, a boy named Kem, his hair wild and tangled as the Nile's currents, watched her with equal parts admiration and envy. He had seen the way she moved among the words, as if they were alive, shimmering with possibilities. He wanted to be brave, to join her, but memories of his father's warnings echoed in his mind. The world was a dangerous place for those who sought to unveil truths not meant to be uncovered. Knowledge was a double-edged sword, and Kem feared, oh how he feared, the blade would cut him down. "I remember," Amora whispered, her voice trembling. "I remember the stories of those who sought too much. The priests would say they were smote by Ra's fury." The shadows around her seemed to deepen, closing in like a tightening noose, and her fingers curled tighter around the scroll as if it were a lifeline. Kem stepped closer, drawn by her fear, yet repelled by his own. What if Ra is simply a myth? What if the only fury we face is our own? His voice was a hoarse whisper, cracking beneath the weight of his thoughts. The night held its breath, as if the stars themselves listened. They stood there, caught in a web of uncertainty, the library looming over them, a monument to humanity's thirst for knowledge and the terror it inspired. The scroll in Amora's hands felt alive, pulsing with the heartbeat of 1,000 scholars, whispering, "Open me. Unravel my mysteries." But what if those mysteries held darkness? What if the truths they unwrapped pushed them to the brink of madness? Amora's heart raced, she could feel the pulse of the cosmos beneath her skin. "What if I want to know?" she asked, the words tumbling from her lips like a desperate confession. "What if I yearn for the darkness, Kem? What if it's the only way I can truly live?" Kem's eyes widened. "But knowledge isn't just enlightenment. It's a curse, Amora. What if we lose ourselves in it?" His voice was a frantic plea, a warning carried on the wings of fear. The weight of history pressed down upon them, ancient scholars who had paid the ultimate price for their pursuit. Shadows of their fates loomed large, haunting the very air they breathed. "I remember the tales of the scholars who challenged the gods," she pressed on, each word sharpening the tension between them like the edge of a blade. "Those who dared to dream, to question, were they not the ones who shaped our world? What is a life unlived but a ghost wandering a cemetery of unspoken truths?" The library around them felt alive, each scroll a flickering flame, casting shadows that danced like spirits, reminding them of the fine line between enlightenment and despair. The walls seemed to lean in, listening closely to the fragile exchange, eager to consume their fears, their hopes, their very essence. A thunderstorm rumbled overhead, the sky darkening, mirroring their turmoil. Kem felt the weight of the storm creeping into his bones, the heavens reflecting his inner chaos. "You're playing with fire, Amora. Are you ready to be burned?" Amora's breath hitched, the truth clawing at her insides. "I want to be more than just a shadow on the wall. I want to understand the world, the good and the bad. Knowledge is power, Kem. It's our birthright." The fervor in her voice ignited something in the air, a crackling energy that wrapped around them like a storm cloud, heavy with anticipation. Kem clenched his fists, a battle raging within him. "But what if it shatters you? What if the truth is a beast, and once unleashed, it cannot be tamed?" The tempest outside mirrored his dread, lightning flashing, illuminating the library's ancient walls, revealing cracks that whispered of its own decay. Silence fell, thick and suffocating. Amora and Kem stood on the precipice, teetering between safety and the abyss. The library trembled as if sensing their conflict, as if the very essence of knowledge hung in the balance. The weight of the unknown loomed larger than ever, a monster waiting just beyond the veil of understanding. "I remember," Amora finally said, her voice a mere whisper, echoing through the silence. "I remember the faces of those who turned away from truth. They were the ones who truly perished, not in body but in spirit." Tears brimmed in her eyes, the vulnerability of her longing crashing against the walls she'd built around her heart. "I refuse to be one of them." Kem's defenses started to crack, the storm of his emotion swirling wildly. "Then let's face it together," he said, a flicker of determination igniting within him. "If we're going to be consumed by the flames, we might as well dance in them." Together, they stepped closer to the shelves, the air thick with the smell of ancient parchment, as if the knowledge contained within was breathing, alive, waiting to be unleashed. The library, a sanctuary of the past, loomed over them, a silent guardian of forgotten wisdom, yet a looming spectre of the dangers that lurked in the shadows of understanding. The scrolls whispered, beckoning them to uncover what lay hidden beneath layers of dust, beyond the veil of ignorance. And so the story spiraled onward, an endless pursuit, a haunting obsession, the cycle of learning and unlearning, a dance on the edge of reason and chaos, a journey without end, leading them deeper into the heart of the unknown. The air crackled with tension, the kind that raises hairs on the back of your neck and sends shivers down your spine. In the courtyard, flames danced like frenzied spirits, casting long shadows that twisted and writhed against the ancient walls. I could smell the smoke, thick and acrid, mingling with the sharp, metallic scent of fear. Alaric stood before the gathering crowd, eyes wide, heart pounding like a war drum. He was a boy on the brink of manhood, arms trembling as he clutched a rusted sword. Each breath he took felt heavy, like he was inhaling the very essence of dread. "I remember," he whispered, though no one was listening, "when the invaders came, I thought they were gods. They were not gods. They were specters of destruction, clad in iron and fury, their banners fluttering like vultures. They descended upon us like a storm, foreign powers with ambitions painted in blood and gold, hungry for our land, our culture, a ravenous beast feasting on the marrow of our existence." And there was Myra, watchful in the shadows, her heart a cage of conflicting emotions. She had loved Alaric since they were children, their laughter echoing in sunlit fields, free and wild. Now, her love felt like a stone in her chest, weighing her down, as she stood on the precipice of despair. She could see the terror in Alaric's eyes, mirrored in the faces of the people surrounding them. They will take everything, she thought, feeling the cruel grip of reality tighten around her throat. Fight! Fight for your homes! Alaric shouted, but his voice trembled, uncertainty lurking just beneath the surface. The crowd was a cacophony of fear, whispers buzzing like angry bees. Who could fight when the enemy was an unending tide, a wave that crashed with violence? I remember the stories my grandmother told me beneath the cover of night, her voice a soft lullaby against the backdrop of an impending storm. "You must remember who you are," she would say, "even when they come for you." But who were we now? What remained of our identity in the face of such devastating force? We were echoes in a hollow chamber, the sound of our heritage fading, replaced by the thundering boots of conquerors. A horn blared in the distance, a sound that reverberated through my bones. The ground trembled as the foreign troops advanced, a wall of steel and malice. Alaric's grip on the sword tightened, I could see his knuckles go white, a raw desperation that mirrored my own fear. What if I fail, he thought, the weight of expectation crushing him, but failure wasn't just his to bear. It was a collective despair, a community hungering for a flicker of hope amidst the encroaching darkness. Myra stepped forward, her heart racing like a wild horse. "Alaric," she called, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "You don't have to do this alone." The words hung suspended in the air, a fragile thread pulling him back from the edge. "We fight together, or not at all." There was something electrifying in her defiance, a spark that ignited a flicker of courage within him. "Together," Alaric echoed, but doubt curled around his heart like a serpent. He was terrified, not just of the battle ahead, but of what would happen if they lost everything. "Remember our dreams," Myra urged, desperation lacing her voice. "The stars we used to chase, the stories we shared? They cannot take that away from us." Her eyes glistened, reflecting the firelight like captured stars. "No matter what happens, we hold on to that." In that moment, the world shrank to the two of them, a universe wrapped in the warmth of shared memories. But just as quickly, the ground shook again, and the illusion of safety shattered like glass. The invaders had crossed the threshold, and with them came the cacophony of destruction. "Alaric!" The call was a lifeline, pulling him back from the edge of despair. The clang of metal rang out like a death knell, chaos erupted, the sound of clashing swords and shattered hopes reverberating like thunder. As the battle raged on, I could see the threads of our culture unraveling, swallowed by the tide of foreign ambition. The invaders wore our symbols like trophies, mocking our heritage, taking not just land but the very essence of who we were. They were a storm of shadows, tainting the bright colors of our life with their dark, unyielding presence. And then, amidst the turmoil, Alaric charged forward, a lion heart roaring against the storm. I felt my chest tighten with hope, the thrill of seeing a spark of bravery in the face of overwhelming odds. The sword swung, a glint of metal flashing in the chaos, but it was not just a weapon. It was a declaration, a cry to the heavens that they would not go quietly into the abyss. But with every blow, with every scream, the weight of loss bore down on us. I saw the shadows of the fallen, the ghosts of those who had fought before, their faces flickering in and out of existence like dimming stars. "Fight!" Alaric bellowed, and for a fleeting instant, the world held its breath as hope ignited, a flickering flame in the encroaching darkness. I remember the euphoria of that moment, the rush of adrenaline as we surged forward, the line between victory and defeat blurred by the chaos. But even as we fought, the spectre of subjugation loomed large, the fear of losing not just a battle, but our very souls. And so, as the night wore on, our cries merged with the echoes of history, a timeless dance between invaders and the invaded, a clash of cultures that resonated through the ages. In that moment, I realized, we were not just fighting for our land, but for our essence, our stories, our very being. Together, or not at all, we whispered, every heartbeat a step forward, every breath a testament to resilience. And in the shadows, the weight of uncertainty loomed, but so did the promise of a dawn yet to come. The battle was far from over, the scars of this night would forge the future, an unbreakable thread binding past and present in a tapestry rich with pain and love. As I stood among the chaos, I felt the weight of time pressing down, the universe spinning in its relentless march, each second a reminder that this was merely a chapter in a story that would echo long after the last sword fell. The influence of foreign powers would cast long shadows, but within those shadows lay the potential for a new dawn, woven from the threads of loss, resilience, and the indomitable spirit of those who dare to remember. The sun hung in the sky like an angry eye, glaring down at a land parched for mercy. Dust devils danced in the distance, twisting and turning, mocking the desperate souls who had once thrived here. I could feel the heat radiate from the cracked earth beneath me, every fissure telling a story of thirst, of longing, of a life that once flourished. I blinked away the oppressive glare, but it wasn't just the brightness that stung my eyes, it was the stark reality of the drought that gnawed at my soul. I remember Ethan, his hands calloused and trembling, clutching a wilted stalk of corn. "It's not just a crop, Claire," he murmured, his voice hoarse, like the dry wind that swept around us. "It's everything." His eyes were haunted, pools of despair where hope had once flickered. The silence around us screamed louder than any words, heavy with the weight of the world's indifference. And then there was Maya, her spirit unyielding, a fierce flame against the backdrop of a dying landscape. She had fought battles with the bravado of a warrior, her sweat-soaked shirt clinging to her as she rallied the community, urging them to stand against the encroaching darkness. "If we don't scream, they won't hear us," she shouted, her voice rising like the phoenix she so desperately wanted to become. But in the quiet moments, when the sun dipped low and shadows stretched like fingers across the land, I could see the cracks in her armor. The uncertainty that festered beneath her fierce exterior, the fear that clawed at her heart, whispering that it might all be for nothing. The ground beneath our feet was a graveyard of dreams. 1,000 plans buried in the dust, stifled by the relentless drought. I remember the first time I saw the river, its once proud flow reduced to a mere trickle. The water had been a lifeline, a heartbeat, and now it lay silent, an echo of what used to be. I could almost hear it whispering, begging for rain, for salvation, a sweet release that never came. Ethan looked at me, his brow furrowed, as if he could read my thoughts. "You should go, Claire," he said, each word punctuated by a deep inhale of the hot, arid air. "You have a chance. You can still leave this place." But how can one leave a piece of their heart behind? The land was stitched into the fabric of my being, each blade of grass that fell was like a piece of myself crumbling into the dust. As days turned to weeks, the tension became a palpable thing, thickening the air like fog, suffocating our resolve. Maya's laughter, once the sound of a joyful rebellion, now felt like shards of glass. "We'll have to reckon with the flood," she said one night, her voice trembling as she stared at the gathering clouds, dark and ominous, threatening in their approach. Those clouds, heavy with the weight of unspent rain, loomed like ghosts, reminders of the chaos that could come from nothingness. I watched the patterns in Maya's eyes shift as the first raindrops began to fall, tentative and uncertain, like a child testing the water. And then, with a ferocity that took our breath away, the skies opened, unleashing torrents that turned the parched earth into a raging river. It was both a blessing and a curse, a twisted reminder of nature's unfathomable ability to give and to take. Ethan was running, and I could see the panic in his eyes as he shouted for Maya, who had raced ahead, her spirit unbroken even as the deluge threatened to swallow everything whole. Maya! His voice cut through the chaos, desperation fueling his every stride. A wave of water surged forward, sweeping away the remnants of our lives, the memories, the struggles, the laughter that echoed into the void. I remember standing there, paralyzed, as time twisted and distorted around us. The floodwaters rose, and with them, dreams and hopes washed away in the torrent. Clocks melted in the chaos, seconds stretched into hours as we fought to grasp onto anything solid. And just like that, the sun disappeared behind a curtain of grey, leaving us in a twilight world where fear intertwined with the remnants of what we once knew. I reached for Maya, my fingertips brushing against her arm, but the current pulled her away like a lover lost in the night. No! I screamed, my voice a raw edge that cut through the roar of the storm. The earth trembled, and I could feel the weight of the world pressing down, a reminder that life was a fragile thing, easily swept away. In that moment, I saw the ghosts of our past rise before me, shadows of those who had come before, their whispers a warning, a reminder of our struggles. You have to fight, they seemed to say, you have to remember. And so, as I plunged into the icy water, fear clawing at my chest, my heart racing, I held on to the belief that somewhere, somehow, we could still find a way to make it through. The flood was fierce, but so was our resolve. And even as the world around me dissolved into chaos, I felt a flicker of something within, an ember of hope, a reminder that we were not just victims of fate but warriors of our own destiny. As the storm raged on, I could only think of the words Maya had once shouted against the backdrop of despair: if we don't scream, they won't hear us. The battle was far from over, and as I fought against the current, I knew we had to rise from this together. Time stretched, fragmented, and in that swirling chaos, I realized that the cycle of nature would continue, droughts would give way to floods, despair would birth determination, and through it all, we would fight to be heard. Each heartbeat echoed against the walls of uncertainty, a rhythm that intertwined our fates, weaving our stories into the fabric of this relentless world. And as we gasped for breath, clinging to each other, I understood. This struggle was not just ours, it resonated with every soul who had ever dared to dream against the odds, against the unforgiving tide of nature. The crisis was only beginning, and with every rising wave, our resolve would strengthen, binding us together in a shared fight for survival, one that echoed through time, through the cosmos, reminding us that we are all part of something larger, something terrifying and beautiful. The moon hung high above the crumbling stone walls, a silent witness to the chaos below. Shadows twisted like serpents through the narrow streets of Thebes, where desperation clung to the air like a thick fog. I could hear the distant wails of a mother, her grief palpable, slicing through the night like a blade. They had taken her son, the guards, with their ironclad fists and hollow eyes, dragged him away for a crime no one saw, a shadow of a thought held captive in a world where justice was a coin tossed into an abyss. I remember the first time I felt the weight of injustice, as heavy as the stones that built these ancient temples. My name is Nefertari, and I am no one, just a woman trying to carve a path through the suffering. But in this moment, the world shifted. The heart of Thebes beat like a war drum, and I was caught in the swell of its rhythm. Across the square, I saw Himari, her hands trembling as she clutched a piece of parchment, its edges frayed like her hopes. She had always been the brave one, a firebrand with eyes that blazed injustice into the hearts of the indifferent. But tonight, her spirit flickered, a candle threatened by a tempest. Nefertari, she called, voice shaking, they've gathered. The council is meeting, today, we fight. Every word pierced my heart, igniting a flicker of hope against the backdrop of despair. The council, an assembly of men who draped themselves in the fineries of power yet wielded decisions like a butcher with a blade, was where fate was carved, not in stone, but in whispers and bribes. Can we? I asked, fear creeping into my throat like a serpent. Can we make them listen? Do you not see? Her voice was fierce. We must not let fear govern us. We are the pulse of this city. We are its breath. And as she spoke, I felt the warmth of her fire transfer like a spark to my soul. Memories washed over me, here my father, his laughter echoing like the sweet notes of a lyre, his lessons about justice untainted by the corruption that had seeped into our land. I remember the time he stood against a corrupt official, his voice ringing clear like a bell in a silent cathedral. I remember the night they took him from us, the silence that followed, the numbness that wrapped around my heart like a vice grip. But I also remember the dreams. Dreams of change, of standing before the council not as a pair of trembling hands but as a force to be reckoned with. The dreams that had begun to fade now surged like a river breaking through the ice. Together, we moved through the streets, our shadows merging, two flickers of hope against a darkened sky. The crowd gathered, a tapestry of faces worn by the weight of loss, stitched together by the desire for justice, a threadbare but tenacious fabric. They were tired, weary souls clinging to the promise of a better tomorrow, yet the fear of reprisal lay thick. And then there was Ramses, a man who wore the crown of authority like a shackle. In him, I saw the embodiment of every nightmare that haunted our city, the cold glint of power wrapped in the silk of entitlement. His laughter was a requiem, echoing through the council chambers, a reminder that justice could be drowned in the swell of its own arrogance. I felt my heart race at the thought of him, his chiseled features, his commanding presence, the way he twisted the law like a puppet master. He had silenced dissent with threats, with fear, and now, as he strode into the council room with the confidence of a lion, I knew he would not listen. But we needed to be heard, didn't we? How could we let the terror of a tyrant silence us? Feel the pulse of this moment, Himari whispered, her hand gripping mine. This is our time. As we stepped into the chamber, I felt the weight of every heart behind us, a tide of emotion rising like a storm at sea. The air crackled with tension, voices rose and fell like the tide against the shore. Ramses stood at the head of the table, arrogance etched into his every feature, a king surrounded by sycophants who fed on his pride. I wanted to scream, to rip the veil from his eyes, to show him the pain he had inflicted. But instead, I stood frozen, my heart pounding. Justice cannot be bought, I finally found my voice, trembling but defiant. It is not a commodity to barter for favors or privilege. It is a right. It is life. The room fell silent, the weight of my words hanging in the air like a blade at the edge of a guillotine. I could see Ramses's eyes narrowing, calculating, but I pressed on. You may think yourself untouchable, but the people will rise. They will not remain silent. I could feel my heart racing, not just for my own life but for every soul who had come before me, and every soul who would come after. I remembered their faces, the mothers, the children, the fathers who had been silenced. I remembered the blood that stained the ground like ink on a forgotten page of history. I will not be silent. But his laughter cut through me, sharp and unrelenting. You think you can sway the winds of power with mere words? With every ounce of strength, I faced him, a fragile figure against the storm. You may be the ruler, but you are not justice. You are a ghost haunting the halls of power. I felt Himari's grip tighten, fear mingling with hope. The crowd surged behind us, a collective heartbeat, a roar rising from the depths of despair. We were not merely shouting into the void, we were echoing the truth that trembled beneath the surface, waiting for the moment to erupt. But in that moment, I saw it, the flicker of fear in Ramses's eyes. The realization that perhaps, just perhaps, the ghosts of the past were ready to rise and take their revenge. The tension thickened, a palpable force in the air, as we stood together, ready to confront the darkness that had gripped our lives for too long. And as the echoes of our defiance filled the chamber, I felt the cosmos shift. Time stilled, the air electric with possibility, hope cracking the foundation of oppression. This wasn't the end, it was just the beginning. The fight for justice wasn't a solitary struggle. It was a symphony of souls intertwined, a haunting melody that would not be silenced. With every heartbeat, our voices rose, no longer alone, but a chorus of hearts demanding to be heard, demanding to be free. And in that moment, I knew we would not falter. Not now. Not ever. The clock ticked with a neck-snapping urgency, each second a heartbeat, each tick a reminder of the chasm between life and death. In that dimly lit room, Sarah stood frozen, her hands trembling over the yellowed pages of her grandmother's journal. The air was thick with the scent of dust and something more, loss, lingering like a ghost that refused to leave. She could hear her heart echoing in her ears, a frantic drumbeat underscoring the moment, as if time itself were holding its breath. In the corner, a silhouette materialized, the figure of her brother, Mark, wrapped in shadows. His face was pale, eyes sunken with denial. "You can't believe this nonsense, Sarah," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. But there was a quiver beneath the surface, a tremor of fear. They had grown up in a house filled with stories, tales of afterlives and spirits told over flickering candles. Now, as they stared into the abyss of their own grief, those stories took on an unsettling weight. "It's just a book." But to Sarah, it was more than a mere collection of words. Each line seemed to pulse with the life of their grandmother, a woman who had painted their childhood with love and warmth. She remembered the way her grandmother's laughter could fill a room, chasing away the shadows like a summer sun. Now, that laughter was a distant echo, leaving only the chilling silence of absence. "What if it's true?" she whispered, more to herself than to Mark, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and hope. "What if we can reach her?" Mark turned his back, frustration radiating off him like heat from a furnace. "You really want to talk to a ghost?" he scoffed, but his breath hitched as he spoke the word. Ghost. The very idea sent tendrils of ice creeping down his spine. He had always been the pragmatist, the rock in the turbulent sea of Sarah's imagination. But now, as doubt clawed at his insides, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting just beyond the veil. Something that could pull him under. Outside, the wind howled, a banshee wail that rattled the window panes, and Sarah thought she could hear her grandmother's voice in the chaos. It was a fleeting whisper, slipping through the cracks of her memory. She wanted to believe. She wanted to grasp at the fleeting threads of connection that still bound them to the woman who had shaped their lives. Desperation gnawed at her, a hungry beast. "We have to try," she said, her voice now steady with determination. For her. The room felt charged, the air thick with the electric tension of the unspoken. Mark hesitated, the internal struggle playing out across his face like a film reel unraveling. He wanted to pull away, to escape this madness, yet something deeper anchored him to the moment, an inexplicable bond to his sister, to the legacy of their grandmother. It was fear that rooted him in place, fear of the unknown, of the darkness lurking at the edges of life. "Fine," he snapped, but the tremor betrayed him. "Let's get this over with." As they gathered candles and salt, the flickering light danced ominously against the walls, casting long shadows that seemed to breathe with life. The ritual felt ancient, as if they were stepping into a timeless narrative, a dance with the spirits that lingered just out of sight. Sarah closed her eyes, heart racing, feeling the weight of the world pressing down, as if all existence hinged on this moment. "We call upon you," she intoned, her voice shaking but resolute, "to join us once more." Silence enveloped them, a thick shroud that threatened to suffocate. The candle sputtered, and for a split second, Sarah thought she saw a figure, a flicker of someone she recognized. Her grandmother, hair silver and eyes bright, smiling. But it was gone, snuffed out like a candle in a gust. Mark stiffened beside her, his breath hitching. "Did you see that?" His voice cracked, a tremor of disbelief edging into his tone. "It was her," Sarah insisted, adrenaline surging, hope igniting like wildfire. "She's here. I can feel her." But doubt slithered into her heart, chilling the warmth of her conviction. What if they were simply orchestrating their own madness? What if they were doomed to dance alone in this void of wordless grief? They plunged deeper into the darkness, calling her name, urging the shadows to yield. The air thickened, heavy with a presence they couldn't quite grasp. A chill swept through the room, and the candles flickered violently, casting grotesque silhouettes on the walls. Sarah's heart raced. This was it. This was the moment when the veil would lift. But what if it didn't? What if they were simply summoning their own demons instead? "Maybe we should stop," Mark whispered, a note of panic threading through his voice. But Sarah's determination hardened. She recalled her grandmother's words, the stories of the beyond, of realms unseen and spirits waiting in the twilight. "No. We can't. We have to know." Desperation fueled them, but in that moment, a piercing silence enveloped them, a suffocating weight that pressed against their chests. Time warped, stretching into infinity, and Sarah felt the universe holding its breath. There was a crack, a sudden disturbance in the air, and the candles extinguished, plunging them into darkness. Sarah. Mark's voice trembled, and the fear was palpable, clawing at the edges of reason. She felt her chest constrict, the shadows closing in. What did we do? In that silence, she could hear her own heartbeat, the pounding echo of her soul's longing. I remember, she whispered, words spilling out like an incantation. I remember the stories, the warmth, and just like that, as if her memories were a beacon, a flicker of light pierced the darkness. It was then that they stood at the edge of the unknown, heartbeats racing as realities began to blur. The room shifted, elongated, a kaleidoscope of memories and whispers swirling around them. The air thickened with emotion, a pulsing energy that threatened to consume them, or perhaps illuminate them. Are you ready? Sarah breathed, fear and hope interwoven. Mark's breath quickened, the weight of their choice looming large. Together, they took a step into the abyss, drawn by the promise of connection, of understanding. The afterlife awaited, a realm of beliefs and practices, a truth cloaked in shadows. And as they stepped forward, the darkness whispered secrets, ancient and raw, leaving behind the echoes of life clinging to them, an unending cycle that would forever intertwine their lives, their struggles, their love. The air crackled with tension, a weight that pressed against my chest, as shadows danced under the flickering fluorescent lights of the workshop. A cacophony of machines whirred and hissed, the rhythm pulsing like a heartbeat. I stood there, breathless, among the chaos, grappling with the shards of shattered dreams. Around me, the future was being forged, but in its wake, it left behind our humanity, clawing at the edges of our souls. I remember Clara's eyes, wide and frantic, as she crouched beside the shattered prototype. Her hands trembled as she ran her fingers over the cold metal, the remnants of our ambition. This was supposed to change everything, she whispered, a plea to the universe. The lights flickered ominously, casting distorted shadows that curled like the wisps of smoke from our failed fire. Every pulse of the machinery echoed in my heart, a reminder of our relentless pursuit, now tainted with uncertainty. Outside, the city roared with life, but here, in this sanctuary of innovation, a storm brewed. I had seen machines that could construct towering monuments in mere hours, structures that kissed the clouds, but what of the human touch? What of the laughter that echoed in the halls of stone, the whispers of dreams woven into the fabric of each brick? I could almost hear the ghosts of those who had toiled before us, their spirits entwined with the very air I breathed, a spectral audience to our folly. Ethan, we can fix this, Clara's voice broke through my spiraling thoughts. Her determination sparked a flicker of hope, but it was overshadowed by the gnawing dread in my gut. We were moving too fast, blind to the cracks forming beneath our feet, and I could feel the weight of decisions that loomed like a colossal shadow. We'll just need to recalibrate the algorithms, adjust the parameters. We can, Clara, I interrupted, the panic rising in my throat like bile. What if we can't? What if this is just the beginning? I looked into her eyes, searching for a glimmer of the future we had envisioned together, a partnership built on shared dreams and reckless ambition. But all I saw was a reflection of my own fear, a mirror to the chaos that had become our lives. Then there was Marcus, the wild card in our game of invention, swinging between genius and lunacy. He stood at the back of the workshop, surrounded by blueprints and scraps of metal, his fingers stained with grease and brilliance. He had always danced on the edge, a tightrope walker above a chasm of madness. You're too focused on the past, he scoffed, eyes alight with fervor. We're at the brink of something monumental. The cosmos is aligning. Why mourn the loss when we can grasp the future? I wanted to scream, to shake him until the truth settled deep in his bones. We weren't just building machines, we were rewriting existence, playing God in a world teetering on the edge of oblivion. Every day, we pushed the limits of what was possible, but at what cost? I felt the weight of centuries pressing down, the histories of those who had built and lost echoing through the hollow spaces of our ambition. Marcus, this isn't a game, Clara shouted, her voice breaking through the cacophony. Tears glistened in her eyes, a reflection of the burden we all carried. It's our lives, our sanity. We can't just keep throwing ourselves into the void. But Marcus laughed, a sound that reverberated through the workshop, a blend of madness and exhilaration. What is life without risk? Without the thrill of the unknown? His passion ignited something within me, a flicker of the fire that had once fueled our dreams. Yet, the flicker danced dangerously close to the flames that threatened to consume us. I remember the whispers of the old clock in the corner, each tick a reminder of the time slipping away, crashing down like the rubble of our aspirations. What if we fail? The words slipped from my lips, raw and rasping. What if all we've built is nothing more than a monument to our hubris? And in that moment, a silence fell, thick and suffocating. The machine stuttered, their hum a hesitant murmur, as if even they sensed the gravity of our words. Clara's breath hitched, an unspoken acknowledgement of our fragility. The city outside pulsed with life, oblivious to the turmoil brewing within these walls. But here, beneath the hum of technology, we felt the weight of our choices, a burden that could crush us entirely. The world had moved on, leaving craftsmanship behind like a relic in a forgotten gallery. We were the architects of a new dawn, but the dawn was shrouded in darkness, filled with uncertainty and fear. I could feel the clock ticking louder now, urging us toward a confrontation that loomed like a storm on the horizon, a tempest of emotions and choices that would irrevocably alter our path. Let's not lose sight of why we started, Clara pleaded, her voice trembling with desperation. We wanted to create, to uplift. Not to drown in our own ambition. She reached for my hand, her touch a lifeline in the swirling chaos. I could feel her warmth, a reminder of what mattered most, a fleeting moment of clarity amidst the storm. But Marcus, consumed by his vision, stepped forward, the embodiment of unchecked ambition. We're about to create something no one has ever seen. A legacy that will outlast us all. His eyes blazed with fervor, but behind that fire lay a flicker of desperation, a fear of being forgotten, of fading into obscurity. The tension crackled in the air, thick and electric. The boundaries between us blurred, our dreams woven together in this fragile moment. I looked at Clara, saw the determination etched on her face, and then at Marcus, a wild spirit torn between brilliance and chaos. A storm was brewing, a confrontation that promised to strip bare the truths we hid beneath layers of ambition and hope. The machines buzzed, a looming reminder of our choices, but amidst that tension, I felt the pulse of fear and excitement intertwining, a dance of possibility that could lead us to salvation or destruction. Every heartbeat resounded with the echoes of our decisions, reverberating into the expanse of the unknown that lay ahead, waiting, watching. The air stung with desperation, every breath a bitter reminder of what was at stake. I stood in the heart of the bustling Cairo market, a cacophony of voices swirling around me like leaves in a storm. Among the chaos, a figure emerged, a woman, her hands raw and calloused, weaving intricate patterns into a tapestry that seemed to pulse with life. Fatima, she was called, a master of her craft, but today, the weight of her world pressed down on her shoulders like a mountain. I remember the stories my grandmother told me, she murmured, her fingers moving deftly, yet trembling. Of how every thread is a prayer, how every knot binds our dreams to the earth. She spoke as if the words were both comfort and curse, each syllable laced with a haunting urgency. Beyond her, the market thrummed with energy, merchants hawking their wares, children darting through the throngs, the scent of spice and sweat wafting thickly in the air. Then there was Amir, a potter, his wheel spinning like a heartbeat, each rotation a whisper of hope. I remember, he said, his voice cracking, when the clay felt like home between my fingers. Now it slips away like sand. He shaped his dreams into the clay, but the looming spectre of a failing economy loomed over him, suffocating. The vibrant colors of his glazes faded each day, replaced by the dull gray of despair. The echoes of his creations mockingly mingled with the laughter of children, reminding him that they too needed bread, not just art. As the sun sank low, casting long shadows across the marketplace, an uneasy silence settled. Fatima glanced at Amir, their eyes locking for a fleeting moment, a shared understanding passing between them, a bond forged in the fires of struggle. They were artisans, yes, but also soldiers in an unseen war, fighting against the tides of change that threatened to obliterate their way of life. With every shout of a merchant, every hiss of a customer bargaining, they were reminded of their insignificance in a world that favored mass production over the sacredness of craft. The tension was palpable, a thick fog that wrapped around them, suffocating yet familiar. "We are nothing but ghosts," Amir whispered, tracing a finger along the rim of a pot he had lost faith in. "Shadows of what once was." His brow furrowed, and for a moment, the weight of his words hung in the air like a funeral shroud. Ghosts, how fitting! Each artisan a remembrance of ancient skills, lost to the relentless march of progress. Fatima resumed her weaving, frantically pulling threads through the loom as if stitching the very fabric of their existence. "This is all we have left," she said, her voice rising above the din. "These stories woven into cloth, these pots shaped by hands that ache. They speak of us." But what did they really speak of? Could the colors of her tapestry or the curves of Amir's pottery hold back the tide of mass-produced chaos? Night began to creep in, wrapped in shadows and whispers, cloaking the market in a shroud of uncertainty. The flickering lanterns cast ghostly shapes on the walls, a dance of light and dark that echoed the turmoil within Fatima and Amir. The world outside, with its machines and factories, mocked their artistry, their painstaking devotion to tradition. I remember the moment when the crisis reached its boiling point, a shattering sound, the crash of glass, the shrieks of horror. A rival merchant, with his gaudy plastic trinkets and cheap knickknacks, had taken the stage, a predator in a jungle of desperation. "Why waste time on what's real?" he bellowed, his voice dripping with disdain. "The people crave convenience, not your laborious crafts." The crowd shifted, uncertainty rippling through them. I could see Fatima's fingers tremble, the thread slipping through her grasp like water through cupped palms. Amir's wheel slowed, the weight of defeat pressing heavily against him. It was as if time had paused, the world holding its breath in anticipation of their response. A heartbeat passed, then another. Fatima's eyes glistened with unshed tears, shadows playing across her face like the ghostly remnants of dreams lost. "Do we fight or flee?" she whispered, the question hanging in the air, heavy as lead. Her voice trembled, a fragile thread in a world so quick to sever connections. Amir's hands tightened around the clay, fingers digging in as if grasping for something tangible, something real. "We fight," he said, a spark igniting within his weary soul. "If we are to be ghosts, let us haunt their dreams with our creations." The resolve in his voice sent shivers down my spine, the intensity of his passion igniting a fire within the crowd that had previously been lulled into complacency. It was a call to arms, a plea against the encroachment of apathy. I felt the air shift, the energy vibrating with a newfound purpose, a collective heartbeat thrumming in unison. Fatima straightened, her hand stilling as if the world no longer existed outside of their shared mission. "Let each thread tell our story," she declared, her voice rising above the murmurs. "Every piece we create, a testament to our existence." The shadows of the night deepened, but they no longer felt suffocating. They were allies, companions in their fight against the encroaching darkness. As the first stars flickered to life in the coal-black sky, I sensed that something monumental was brewing, a rebellion forged in artistry, a defiance against the mundane. And so they stood, two souls intertwined in the fight for their very essence. In that moment of clarity, I understood the truth. Artisans and daily goods were not mere footnotes in the sprawling narrative of the Egyptian economy, they were the heartbeat, the pulse, the very lifeblood of a culture teetering on the brink. "Let us rise," Amir said, and the crowd surged forward, carried along by the tides of hope and desperation. Every step echoed with the promise of a new dawn, a reminder that they were not alone. The artisans, crafting their dreams from clay and thread, were not just heroes in a forgotten chapter, they were the unsung champions of an unyielding legacy, clawing their way back to the light. As the echoes of their resolve resounded through the marketplace, I felt the cosmos shift, the stars aligning in a dance of fate. Each heartbeat became a drum, each breath a proclamation of survival. The battle was not over, it had only just begun. And in the silence that followed, amid the flickering lights and hopeful hearts, the artisan crafts of Egypt whispered a promise, to endure, to create, to love. The air crackled with unspent energy, a tension that curled around the throat of the village as the sun dipped behind the hills, casting long shadows that danced like phantoms on the cobblestone streets. I stood there, a mere witness, heart pounding, pulse racing, waiting for the first note of the festival to pierce through the heavy silence. The scent of wood smoke and roasting meat wove through the crowd, mingling with laughter, echoing the joy that should have filled the night. But in that eerie pause, under the watchful gaze of a crescent moon, something felt wrong. Elda's eyes glimmered, but not with joy. They were wide, frantic, haunted by a secret she dared not speak. "They won't come," she whispered, her voice trembling like the leaves in the chill of the approaching night. Elda, once the heart of the festival, now stood apart, gripped by a quiet despair that gnawed at her soul. I could see the shimmering fabric of her dress, vibrant and lively, but it felt like a shroud, a mask hiding the gnawing fear that threatened to swallow her whole. Across the square, Rowan leaned against a weathered stone wall, his fingers tracing the patterns of ancient carvings, searching for answers in the past. He felt it too, the weight of absence pressing down. "What if they don't remember us?" His voice was low, almost lost in the murmur of the crowd, but it struck a chord within me, a resonance of dread. The elders had spoken of the festival's importance, of the bonds forged in firelight and laughter, yet here we stood, on the precipice of oblivion, teetering toward a future where memory faded like smoke in the night air. I felt a cold shiver race down my spine. "They'll come," I insisted, though my own heart was heavy with doubt. I grasped Elda's hand, feeling the pulse of anxiety beneath her skin, like a drumbeat counting down to calamity. "They have to." But as the darkened sky swallowed the last hints of twilight, the first echoes of music emerged. A single flute, delicate like a whisper, summoned the shadows of what once was. The notes floated through the air, teasing us, leading us toward the fire that flickered in the center of the village square, its flames licking at the night as if yearning for warmth. But even the fire's glow seemed dimmer, a feeble light fighting against an encroaching darkness that loomed at the edges of our celebration. "I remember the warmth," Elda said, her voice thick with longing. "I remember the laughter, the stories, the way the stars twinkled like jewels against the deep blue sky." Her memory spilled out like a cascade of shimmering water, but the echoes felt hollow, as if the universe itself held its breath. Rowan's gaze shifted towards the crowd, eyes searching, desperate. "They're here," he murmured, but in the bottom of his heart, he knew. They weren't truly here. Not the way we needed them to be. Faces blurred in the flames, laughter rang out, but the laughter was tinged with a hollow note. Friends who had come to celebrate were nothing but shadows, remnants of joy that felt misplaced, as if they were pretending to be part of something greater while their hearts remained shackled to the burdens of reality. And then the drums kicked in. A thunderous heartbeat that reverberated through the ground beneath us, sending ripples of fear and excitement in equal measure through the crowd. Each beat felt like a countdown, a reminder of time slipping through our fingers like sand. I watched as Rowan braced himself, his jaw set, the flicker of determination in his eyes. "If we're to save this festival, we must remind them why they came," he said, a fire igniting within him that I hadn't seen before. Elda's hand slipped from mine, and in that moment, the air felt too thick to breathe. "What if they don't want to remember?" she replied, her voice a fragile thread. "What if they're too afraid?" "Then we remind them," I said, though doubt gnawed at my insides. Memories of past celebrations surged forth, vivid and intoxicating. I could almost taste the sweet mead, hear the raucous laughter of friends dancing under a canopy of stars. But now? Now the stars felt distant, and the laughter echoed like a ghost. As Rowan moved toward the fire, his silhouette cut against the flames, a warrior poised for battle. Elda followed, and I trailed behind, a reluctant spectre. Together, we faced the crowd, a motley assembly of faces twisted by uncertainty and fear. The rhythm of the drums quickened, filling the air with a pulse, and slowly, one by one, the villagers began to sway. I could see it, behind the veil of doubt, a flicker of remembrance ignited. "I remember," I called out, my voice trembling but resolute. "I remember the stories we shared, the bonds that tied us together." The words spilled forth, raw and unfiltered, each syllable a plea, a lifeline cast into the void. Elda joined in, her voice rising above the din. "I remember the warmth of friendship." Rowan's voice followed, a powerful call to action. "We are not mere shadows. We are a tapestry of memories, woven together by laughter and grief. We belong to each other." The crowd began to stir, and slowly, hesitantly, faces emerged from the gloom. A few voices chimed in, joining the chorus of memories, and suddenly the festival transformed. The fire roared to life, illuminating the night, casting away the shadows that had threatened to smother us. But, deep within me, a whisper remained. This wasn't finished. The confrontation was merely a spark, and the darkness would come again, creeping back into the edges of our lives, waiting for a moment of vulnerability to plunge us once more into silence. The festival, once a celebration, felt like a fragile truce. As laughter erupted, mingling with the drum beats, I dared to hope. Perhaps that was the essence of community, a fragile web woven from shared joys and heartaches, a reminder that even in the darkest of nights, we could be the light for one another. And though the night raged on, I could feel the echoes of our voices binding us together, a promise that would linger long after the flames turned to embers, a flickering reminder of what it means to remember, to feel, to truly celebrate life. The sun hangs low in the smog-stained sky, a weary eye peering through a veil of dust. I can feel the heat seeping into my skin, a slow burn, an oppressive reminder of something dying. The marketplace, once alive with the laughter of children and the shouts of merchants hawking their wares, now holds its breath. Shadows stretch long, curling around the feet of the desperate and the lost. A donkey brays, its mournful sound echoing against crumbling walls, but no one answers. It's as if the city itself knows that something is unraveling, something ancient and sacred, and it waits for the inevitable. I remember when the Nile was a mother, nurturing life with her bountiful floods, when the air crackled with promise. Now, it lies sullen and sluggish, a serpent choking on the very soil that birthed civilization, like a once great king reduced to a shadow in his own hall. The whispers of the past shudder through the alleys, colliding with the bitter present. My heart races, a fragile bird fluttering within the confines of my chest, as I watch Rummy, a once proud scribe, his hands now trembling like autumn leaves. The ink-stained papyrus lies abandoned at his feet, an echo of his lost purpose. I can't, he mutters, as if the very words are a curse. Rummy's face glistens with sweat, each droplet a testament to his struggle, his fight against the dark tide of despair. His son, Taria, watches him, wide-eyed and fearful, a boy too young to grasp the weight of their world crumbling around them. He clutches a small wooden toy, the king of beasts, but even that seems to mock him now. I remember when you used to say stories hold power, father, Taria whispers, voice trembling like a leaf in the wind. What power do they hold when we are forgotten? Rummy looks at his son, and I see the deep fissures of pain in his eyes. A father, a storyteller, now a ghost haunting the halls of his own memories. His love, an anchor, threatens to drown him as the waves of loss crash against the shores of his consciousness. The stories are still there, my son, he replies, voice cracking. They just fade like the ink on this scroll. The irony, how love can be both a balm and a blade. Rummy has loved fiercely, but in this world of decay, his love feels like a futile gesture against the encroaching darkness. The gods watch, indifferent, from their crumbling temples, once proud and now haunted shells. I feel the weight of the ages pressing down, a cosmic joke played by fate. And then there's Hatshepsut, a queen stripped of her title, abandoned by history like an outcast. She prowls the shadows of the city, her heart a battlefield where loyalty clashes with ambition. The very stones beneath her feet remember the echoes of her reign, the laughter of her people, and yet, here she stands, a spectre in her own land. Where are they now? She hisses into the stillness, her voice a venomous whisper. The loyal? The devoted? Her eyes glint with a haunted madness, the darkness swirling around her like a shroud. She's a warrior without a cause, fighting against an unseen enemy, her heart heavy with the burden of memories that refuse to die. Once, she was a beacon, now, she embodies the decline, a woman scattered into fragments by the very people she tried to uplift. Her fingers graze the walls, and I can almost feel the pulse of history thrumming beneath them, those moments of triumph and despair, now reduced to whispers lost in time. Rummy and Hatshepsut share a moment, their eyes locking as if recognizing the shared weight of their unraveling destinies. There's a connection, a flicker of understanding. They are both haunted by the same spectre, the end of an era. A bond forged in the fires of loss, yet a bond that can't break the shackles of their fates. The air thickens with tension as the sun dips lower, casting an eerie glow across the horizon. The shadows of the past loom large, riding on the back of fear and uncertainty. I can almost hear the whispers of the once great civilization, a chorus of hearts breaking, dreams shattering. Time is a thief, Hatshepsut says, her voice trembling with emotion. It robs us of our stories, our legacies. She has become a ghost, a lesson in what happens when power crumbles under the weight of its own hubris. How could a civilization, once the epitome of glory, fall to its knees? I feel my heart squeezing in my chest, the memories of glory now colliding with the stark reality of decay. Everything we built, Rummy's voice falters. It's slipping away like sand through our fingers. He reaches out, clutching at the remnants of hope, but the grains of time mock him, relentless and unyielding. Taria watches with innocent eyes, a boy caught in the tempest of adult despair, and I can feel the weight of generations bearing down on him. I remember the stories, how they spoke of gods and kings, of everlasting life and undying love. But those tales are fading, being written over by the ink of fear and despair. The laughter that once filled the air is replaced by an eerie silence, a chilling premonition of what is to come. The Nile's waters churn, restless, as if sensing the change, the decline creeping in like a thief in the night. A shadow of a once great civilization, now a ghost drifting through the sands of time. Hatshepsut's laughter, once a melody, now a haunting echo, reverberating against the walls of her shattered palace. The sky darkens, a storm brewing on the horizon, a tempest of emotions, of history collapsing under its own weight. Rummy, Hatshepsut, and Taria stand together, three figures against the backdrop of an impending storm, a haunting tableau of humanity lost in its own ambition. The world around them trembles, and I feel the heartbeat of the earth, the pulse of history stirring, reminding us that nothing lasts forever, not glory, not love, not even life. The clock ticks mercilessly, and as the darkness envelops them, I can only hope that their stories will linger, haunting the shadows of what once was. The air is thick with unease, a palpable tension that prickles at the back of your neck as you step into the shadowed hall of a long-forgotten temple. Torchlight flickers, casting dancing shadows that morph into figures from a world lost to time. I remember the first time I felt that chill, the moment I stood before the grand, crumbling edifice, a portal to a civilization that whispered secrets and promises yet to be unwrapped. The scent of damp stone mixed with dust and something ancient, a memory of power, magic, and the lingering echo of lives once lived. James stood beside me, sweat beading on his forehead. A skeptic by nature, his eyes darted around, searching for signs of reason in the mystique that enveloped us. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, arms crossed, as if to shield himself from the whispers of the past. Yet, I saw it, his eyes glimmered with something unspoken, a flicker of curiosity that contradicted his bravado. The years spent poring over dusty tomes hadn't left him unscathed, the legacy of Egypt had wrapped around his heart like a serpent, constricting tighter with every revelation. And then there was Layla, an artist who had always seen the world through vibrant hues. She stood silently, transfixed, her fingers lightly tracing the engravings on the wall, hieroglyphs that told tales of gods and pharaohs, of love and vengeance, of life and death. It was as if the walls were breathing, whispering tales of glory and betrayal, of an empire that fell into disarray like a sandcastle devoured by the tide. She inhaled deeply, her breath shaky. "Do you feel it?" she asked, her voice trembling. "It's as if they're watching us." I remember holding my breath, teetering on the edge of disbelief and wonder. The myths of Egypt, sprawling like the Nile at its fullest, surged through us, pulling at our souls. But standing there, beneath the oppressive weight of the past, I couldn't help but wonder, were these stories of gods and magic merely the fabrications of a people desperate to infuse their lives with meaning? Or was there something deeper, a truth hidden beneath layers of sand and time? We ventured deeper into the catacombs, where the air grew heavier, each step echoing like a heartbeat drumming in the silence. Shadows swirled around us, and the walls whispered secrets with muted fervor. The tension mounted, and I could sense the weight of our differing beliefs. James scoffed at the allure of these myths, convinced they were nothing more than fanciful stories. But Layla, oh, Layla, her heart thrummed with the rhythm of 1,000 tales, each more vivid than the last. Lightning crackled in the distance, illuminating our path for a fleeting heartbeat. In that split second, I saw it, the statues come to life in my mind, the pharaohs with their golden crowns, their eyes glinting with knowledge of the cosmos. What if they knew something we don't? I whispered, the words slipping out before I could hold them back. What if the very myths we dismiss hold the key to understanding our own existence? James rolled his eyes, but Layla's gaze was piercing, eyes alight with something I couldn't name. But what if it's all just a reflection of our fears? Our desires, she challenged, her voice a soft yet fierce flame. We're all searching for meaning in the chaos. The wall seemed to lean in closer, the hieroglyphs shifting, alive with a pulse that resonated in our chests. I felt a wave of anger rise within me, a tempest of frustration, because I understood, whether myths or reality, the legacy of these people was a mirror. Their struggles, their triumphs, their downfalls were the very essence of human existence, and we were no different. A sudden crash echoed through the corridors, rattling my bones. Layla gasped, her hand flying to cover her mouth, eyes wide like saucers. James's bravado faltered as he turned toward the sound, fear creeping into his voice. What was that? I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, as if the echoes of the past were peering through the veil of time, judging us, questioning our worth to even tread here. Perhaps they are angry, I murmured, half to myself, half to them. Angry that we've reduced their legacy to myths, to stories without weight or consequence. The walls trembled slightly, and in that moment, I saw shadows coalesce into forms, sphinxes and pharaohs, the phantoms of a civilization that once thrived. I felt a shiver crawl up my spine, and I thought of their sacrifices, their dreams woven into the fabric of the cosmos. Maybe we're the ones who are lost, I said, conviction flooding my veins. James took a step back, his skepticism faltering in the face of our collective dread. You're both insane, he whispered, a tremor in his voice. Yet, I could see the crack in his armor, the way his heart raced against the tide of disbelief. We were caught in the currents of fate, spiraling toward an unseen climax, our breath hitching with every heartbeat. The air crackled with energy, a tempest of emotion swirling around us, fear, anger, desperation, and it was intoxicating. Each moment pulled me deeper into the abyss of their legacy, a morass of myth and reality, and I realized, there are no easy answers. In that echoing darkness, I found clarity. It was not about summoning the dead or deciphering the hieroglyphs. It was about understanding the threads that bind us to those who walked these halls before us, the mythos of human experience. The shadows whispered louder now, urging me forward, urging me to confront the truths that lie tangled within. And as we stood there, suspended in that moment, I understood the legacy of Egypt was not merely in the grand tales of gods and pharaohs, nor solely in the skeletal remains of an empire. It was in the haunting echoes of our own fears and dreams, in the cyclical dance between myth and reality. The confrontation was not just with the past, but with ourselves, our narratives, our truths, the fragility of our own legacies. The air crackled around us, thick with potential, as the whispers grew insistent, a promise and a warning intertwined. And I knew, deep in my bones, that this would not be the end, but merely the beginning of something far more profound.